Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Janice Wray. So I'm going to ask the usher to bring Ms. Wray in, please. Good morning, Ms. Wray.
Good morning.
How are you feeling today? All right? I know it's been a long process.
It has.
If you know by now how we normally handle breaks and so on, but if at any stage you think you'd like to have a bit of a breather, will you let me know?
Yes.
And you might find that if you try and keep your answers a bit shorter and your speech a bit slower, you might find it a bit less tiring.
Yes, I'll take that on board.
We'll see how we get on.
Okay.
Anyway, when you're ready, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Thank you. And good morning, members of the panel. Ms. Wray, good morning to you. Now, we were at October 2016 last night, and the subject of door closers and fire action notices, particularly fire action notices. Can we now move, please, to the 17th of November 2016 and a document at TMO 1001724. This is the 17th of November 2016 notification of fire safety deficiencies for Grenfell Tower issued by the LFEPA on that date. Can you please look at page 6? On that page you can see that it says in the under Article 14, you see it says there, at the time of the audit, your procedures to be followed is this Article 15.1. At the time of your audit, your procedures to be followed in the event of serious and imminent danger were inadequate. It was found that fire action notices were not displayed in your common parts. Now, the Grenfell notice it was issued a year after the Adair Tower fire, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was 11 months after the enforcement for Adair Tower was issued, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And 2 months after you told the Health and Safety Committee that fire action notices would be installed in all properties.
Yes.
Yes. Do you know why fire action notices had not been installed in Grenfell Tower by this time, mid-November 2016?
I believe they were on order at that time, so we were awaiting delivery and then they would be installed.
Right. When did they first go on order? Do you remember?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Was it shortly or a long time before the receipt of this deficiency notice?
Sorry, I wouldn't be able to say at this stage.
Right. Now, at around about the same time, do you remember a blog post going up from a Grenfell Tower resident, to be precise, on the 20th of November 2016?
In general, I only received blog posts if they were sent to me directly because they were blocked on our system. So I'm sure.
Right. Well, let's see how we go with it. If you haven't seen it, you haven't seen it. TMO 00835 this is the TMO Playing with Fire blog, issued by or posted by the Grenfell Action Group on 20th of November 2016.
Okay.
And there is a photograph of a high-rise block with a fire coming out of one of its windows. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, do you know which block that was?
I don't.
It looks as if it might have been Shepherd's Court, but what I'm...
Don't think it is, but anyway.
Yes, what I'm going to ask you is whether this is a document you've ever seen before.
I think I will have seen it, yes.
Do you think you saw it at the time?
Yes, quite possibly.
Even though it was blocked on the system?
Sometimes I think some of our senior managers would send me copies if there was something on the blog that related to health and safety or fire safety, so I think I would have seen it, yes.
Right. Do you remember who it was who sent you this? Which of your senior managers?
Sorry, no, I wouldn't. It may have come from Peter Madison, I'm not sure.
I see. Can we go to page 2, please, and look at the third paragraph on that page? It says there, in the penultimate paragraph, under the second web reference, in the aftermath of the Adair Tower fire, the London Fire Brigade found that the KCTMO had not been looking after the safety of residents properly and issued an enforcement notice compelling them to improve the fire safety in the escape staircases and to provide self-closing devices to all the tower block's front doors. A further audit by the London Fire Brigade of the neighbouring Hazelwood Tower, located alongside Adair Tower, found similar breaches of health and safety legislation, and an enforcement order was also issued for this property, forcing the TMO to address the serious concerns of the Fire Brigade's inspectors. What is shocking, he goes on to say, what is shocking is that a decade ago a fatality occurred due to a fire at Hazelwood Tower, and the fire investigation team ordered that the grilles on the fire escape staircase be covered over. This never happened, and it's believed that the uncovered grilles at Adair Tower, Hazelwood Tower's twin block, acted like a chimney and were responsible for the accelerated spread of the fire and smoke damage. Now, I'll come back to the subject that is covered by that paragraph perhaps a little later on, but what I want to focus on with you is this one. In the last 20 years, and despite the terrifying power surge incident in 2013 and recent fire at Adair Tower, the residents of Grenfell Tower have received no proper fire safety instructions from the KCTMO. Residents were informed by a temporary notice stuck in the lift and one announcement in a recent regeneration newsletter that they should remain in their flats in the event of fire. There are not, and have never been, any instructions posted in the Grenfell Tower notice board or on individual floor as to how residents should act in the event of a fire. Anyone who witnessed the recent tower block fire at Shepherd's Court in nearby Shepherd's Bush will know that the advice to remain in our properties would have led to certain fatalities, and we are calling on our landlord to reconsider the advice that they have so badly circulated. Do you remember reading that paragraph at the time?
Yes.
Now, it's right, isn't it, that as at the date of this blog post, there were no permanent fire action notices in Grenfell Tower?
That's right.
Yes, and
because they were on order, as we said.
Because they were on order, and we've seen that you'd had the deficiency notice 3 days before. In that context, did you think at the time that Edward Defarn's, or the GAG blog's concerns about the lack of fire safety advice notices at Grenfell Tower were legitimate?
If that was the only way that we were notifying residents of their fire procedures, they would have been legitimate. But as we discussed yesterday, there were other methods of communication in terms of handbooks and new residents and websites. And also what I didn't refer to yesterday was when we did community days that we would often invite the fire brigade to attend also. So there were other methods of cascading that information.
I see. So taking the facts as stated in this paragraph, you dispute, I think, the stated fact that residents of Grenfell Tower have received no proper fire safety instructions from the TMO.
I would dispute that, yes.
And you dispute it because, is it that you say there were fire safety instructions, proper or not, contained in things like Link magazine, Homeowner magazine, and the occasional circulars?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Do you also dispute the fact that as the rest of it goes on to say, there was a temporary notice stuck in the lift and an announcement in a recent regeneration newsletter? That, I think, is consistent with what you were saying before, isn't it?
We spoke about 2 regeneration newsletters having fire safety information yesterday, I believe. And I'm not sure we've had a discussion about signs in lifts, but so I can't really comment on that, but that was part of what the project team put in place, I think, temporarily. Yes.
And the reference there to the advice to remain in our properties, what do you say that was contained in? Was it, again, the Link magazine, Homeowner magazine,
website? Yeah. Well, every time we published that information, that was the information that we were publishing, is in the event of a fire that isn't impacting on your flat. This is the advice that we're providing.
Now, and I think you mentioned the Tenant handbook.
Yes, that's right. The Tenant handbook and other sort of circulars and the induction, the introductory letter to new residents. There were a variety of things that we discussed yesterday.
Now, leaving aside the question of the notification, in respect of the content of the notice, you can see that seems to be the thrust of GAG's, Mr. Defarn's complaint in the last sentence there, which is the stay put advice. Were you aware at this time that there had been a fire at Shepherd's Court in August 2016?
Yes, I was.
You were, and we could see the photograph on the front. Were you aware that the fire had spread on the outside of that building?
Yes.
Yes. Did you make any further inquiries about the Shepherd's Court fire after you became aware of this blog?
I would have been looking for information on the cause of the fire from when I knew about it. I'm aware that Carl Stokes was doing his own kind of investigation. I think he went to the block himself to witness to get as much information about the cause and how it had spread as possible. And I would have certainly had conversations with him on that issue.
Did you?
Yes.
You did. What was the upshot of those conversations?
So I believe it was a faulty appliance that caused the fire. And I believe there were spandrel panels on the outside of the block, which had enabled the fire to spread on the external face of the building.
Now, we know that you received, and we'll come to it much later in your evidence, you received the letter from Hannah Lauer of the LFB of the 6th of April 2017.
Yeah.
Which was circulated by El Fipa in the light of the Shepherd's Court fire some 8 months before that. But here is the blog in 2016, November 2016, only 3 months after the fire. Did you have a discussion with Carl Stokes about the Shepherd's Court fire and external fire spread once you'd seen this blog, or even before this blog, but once you'd known about the Shepherd's Court fire?
Yes, as I said, we would have discussed it. He would have done his own investigations. I would have been asking the fire brigade when we had our liaison meetings if there was any information they could share with us, if there was anything that we could learn or that we should be mindful of. I would have been looking in my kind of professional publications and anywhere for any information that would be helpful or that would be relevant.
What did you find?
Other than what we've said about them being spandrel panels and our faulty appliance, at that stage, I don't think there was much more in the public domain.
After you'd seen that the Shepherd's Court external fire spread problem combined with stay put as the standing advice was a real concern to the Grenfell Tower residents, at least according to the GAG blog, did you take any steps or any further steps to investigate whether there was anything about the Shepherd's Court fire which had particular relevance to Grenfell Tower?
I was constantly seeking further information, but as is often the case, sometimes it takes some considerable time to get the level of detail that you would want. So I would have been speaking, I'm sure we would have discussed it at liaison meetings. I would have got what the fire brigade were able to tell me. I would have been looking out for more information. I'm not sure I discussed it with the brigade in relation to Grenfell Tower, but just in terms of our stock generally.
Did you have any thoughts along the lines of wondering whether the stay put advice as the standing advice to all residents in Grenfell Tower was appropriate in light of, first of all, the external fire spread that you knew had existed or had happened at Shepherd's Court, and secondly, the concern about that expressed by the GAG blog?
So my understanding that the fire was propagated at Shepherd's Court because of the spandrel panels, and my investigations internally seem to indicate that we didn't have any blocks with spandrel panels. So I will have looked at it more holistically, but that, from the information I had at the time, was the root of the problem, and we didn't appear to have that. In terms of the stay put strategy, the fire risk assessments were still saying that was appropriate for high-rise buildings. The fire brigade was still saying that was appropriate for high-rise buildings. So the experts and the fire and rescue services were saying that was appropriate. So I'm not sure that I challenged it more than take their advice and speak to the assessor.
Did anybody tell you, Carl Stokes or any other fire safety professional, that because it was spandrel panels at Shepherd Court, the problem at Shepherd Court was limited to buildings with spandrel panels on them?
No, I don't expect they did say it was limited to, no.
So when you said a moment ago that, as if I've understood your evidence, that because the fire was propagated at Shepherd Court because of the spandrel panels, and you discovered that you didn't have any blocks with spandrel panels, you didn't think any more about the efficacy or safety of stay put at Grenfell.
We were talking specifically about the Shepherd's Court fire. I'm advising you of what I became aware of and what I considered with colleagues and with the fire risk assessor and with the fire brigade. We're always looking at the stock and thinking, are there things we're not aware of? Things come to light all of the time, but at that stage, I'm pretty sure from the information I had, that was my focus.
Right. But I think you're saying, correct me if this is wrong, that nobody actually ever advised you that you didn't have to worry about stay put. It was a good policy, at least where there were no spandrel panels on high rises.
It didn't call into question. I think that's in the public domain. It didn't call into question the advice of the purpose-built guide, where there was compartmentation, that stay put was the appropriate. My understanding is that not just in our sector but across nationally, that wasn't called into question.
Now, let's move into December 2016. TMO 00865-831. This is an email chain between Peter Madison, Barbara Matthews and you, which starts on the 2nd of December 2016. If we go to page 3, please, we can see that there is an email here from Peter Madison to Truda Scriven and Pete Griffiths. You see that?
Yes.
And it's about the posting I've just shown you, the Playing with Fire blog. Truda and Peter, attached as a recent posting on Mr. Defan's Grenfell Action Group website. Truda, could any of the allegations be described as libelous? The comments are scaremongering at the least. Do we need to respond to reassure residents? Peter and Janice would appreciate your advice. And then you respond to that. If we go up, please, to page 2, you can see that you write to Barbara Matthews and say, Barbara, I've highlighted the section in the recent blog which Peter has just circulated, which refers to the fire death at Hazelwood. If you're agreeable, I'd like to forward this to the Borough Commander and request his view on how we can respond to this without breaching any confidentiality issues, and ideally with also getting the LFB's buy-in to our response. Please confirm that you're happy for me to do this. And then if we scroll up to page 1, we can see that Barbara Matthews responds to you and says this. Janice, I've spoken to Robert and he agrees that we should do nothing. This is not the sort of website we should be responding to. Why did you want to get the Borough Commander's view on the blog post?
The specific issue that I've raised there in relation to the death at Hazelwood, I did not think that was true. I had no knowledge of a death at Hazelwood. I have no knowledge of us ever being asked to put on or take off grills on staircases. And I thought it was misinformation. And therefore, I think if it's misinformation, then it is to some extent scaremongering. So I was wanting to get to the bottom of that, and the people who could probably advise me definitively were the fire brigade. So I wanted to be able to ask them to confirm whether in their from their records whether there was any basis in fact.
And did you?
I actually, as I read it now, I can't recall whether I did. I think I was instructed not to. Right.
And how did you think you could get the LFB to buy into the response?
I think that's probably a kind of pathetic form of words on my... I was most interested to find out whether something had happened that I was unaware of, and I really didn't think it was the case.
Right. Can we then go to TMO 10045908? Just takes one, perhaps regrettably, back a week or two in time to the 23rd of November 2016, email from Judith Blakeman to Robert Black about this blog post. And if we go to page 3 on that, you can see that, if you go to page 3, there's an email there, 23rd of November 2016, Dear Robert, and she says, well, Mr. Daffan engages in hyperbole in his Grenfell Action Group blog. It is read by most residents of the tower, and the most recent article causes me concern. Mr. Daffan discussed the fire safety issue with me at a recent meeting, and I did point out that the instructions in the event of fire had been included in one of the refurbishment newsletters. However, I do take his point that instructions are not permanently available on notice boards, nor in a discreet letter to all residents, and in appropriate languages where required, and I'm asking whether this can be rectified. And then she says, for your information, here's an extract from the most recent blog that does cause me worry, especially the allegation about Hazelwood Tower. Is this correct? And we don't need to look at that. And then she quotes from the rest of the parts that I've read to you. And if we go up to page 2, we can see that you responded to her the next day.
Yes.
Well, I think, actually, page 1. Yes, you responded to her the next day. And copied Robert Black and Barbara Matthews in on that. Dear Councillor Blakeman, and you say, Robert has asked me to respond to your email highlighting fire safety issues raised by Mr. Daffan in his blog. With regard to fire procedures in Grenfell Tower, I can confirm that these were included in newsletters to the block, and they are also documented on our website. Further, we do publish regular fire safety articles in the Link magazine to all residents, and we write to all new tenants to outline the fire strategy for their block, the procedure to follow in the event of a fire in their flat, and also a fire elsewhere in their block, and advise them of the London Fire Brigade's LFB free home fire safety visit and how to access this. And then you say this, additionally, I can advise that we are currently considering a programme of installation of fire action notices similar to those now installed at Adair and Hazelwood Towers across all blocks. There has been a difference of opinion amongst London Fire Brigade officers on the value of fitting these notices within a block with a stay-put fire strategy. However, we are keen to be proactive about this, and I can confirm that we will be proceeding with the fitting of these notices at Grenfell Tower. It's likely that this will be completed within the next 2 weeks. And then you go on to, I'll read the rest to you because we've had a discussion about the topic. However, you say, Mr. Daffan appears to be challenging the stay-put fire strategy, stating that this is the wrong strategy and that we should be adopting a one-out, all-out approach at Grenfell Tower. I would emphasise that despite extensive discussions with the LFB and other fire professionals, including our fire consultant and senior consultants from specialist fire engineering companies in relation to Grenfell Tower, at no point has the need to change the stay-put strategy even been raised. Further, the LFB operational crews continue to be very proactive about undertaking regular familiarisation visits to this block and the other blocks on this estate, and remain content with the arrangements in place. Finally, with regard to the mention of a fatal fire at Hazelwood Tower 10 years ago, I'm afraid I have no knowledge of this. However, I have requested that the LFB interrogate their records and advise on this. And then at the very end you say, I can confirm, you see, this is the second line, I can confirm that Adair Tower was regularly audited by the LFB, most recent in the month before the fire took place, and no recommendations were made in relation to the design of either staircase or the lift lobbies. Requirements in relation to those areas were included in the enforcement notices, as it was only following the fire that the LFB recommended that changes to the building's original design were required. Now, there's quite a lot in that response we need to look at, but let's start with the first paragraph. With regard to fire procedures, you refer there to a difference of opinion amongst LFB officers on the value of fire action notices. Who was it in the LFB who was against fire action notices?
I think I haven't described it very well. There wasn't a difference of opinion. I think there was a difference of a view of actually how useful they were. And I think some of the minutes we looked at yesterday from the liaison meeting indicated that Rebecca Burton said that she didn't feel strongly about fire action notices. So I think what I meant to say, and haven't said it very clearly, is there was a difference of view about how valuable they were, how useful they were, how necessary they were. Right.
Did you seek to clarify with Rebecca Burton the inconsistency, perhaps that's too strong a word, between her views and the deficiency notices that you received in respect of fire action notices, and particular 15.1 that I showed you at the start of your evidence this morning?
No, we accepted that it was in the enforcement notice, so it was absolute requirement, and I'd confirmed, as we discussed yesterday, that what was in the enforcement notice was expected to be put in place at all of our blocks, so we were working towards that.
Why did you not mention here in this email that the TMO had received a deficiency notice for Grenfell Tower for failing to install fire action notices?
I have no idea. I think I probably responded directly to the specific points that she raised, and I don't know why. There was as you say, there's quite a lot in the email, and it may just have dropped off my radar.
Well, how could it have dropped off your radar? Was it not a relevant matter to bring to her attention in the context of her inquiry about fire action notices?
Perhaps it was.
Well, so why didn't you deal with it? Why didn't you just bring it to her attention and
Well,
say...
at this stage, I can't give you any explanation other than it was an oversight.
Well, how can it have been an oversight? It was only a week before.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you want me to say. I can only tell you that, I can only tell you that I can't recall any specific reason. There was no reason why I would not have included it, but I was trying to give her quite a lot of comprehensive information, and it just literally dropped off my radar.
You see, what I'm not wanting you to give any particular answer. I'm just seeking, as far as I can, to understand the thinking. I mean, did you get loads of deficiency notices so that this one might have slipped through the net? It doesn't look like it.
No, we didn't.
So the receipt of a deficiency notice from the LFB in respect of one of your buildings would have been quite an important communication, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, it was a non-statutory notice, but we did treat them with seriousness.
Yes, and that's because it would have indicated to you that something with your health and safety arrangements for residents of your buildings had gone wrong. Yes?
It would indicate that there were deficiencies on the day that the block was audited. That's how the brigade saw it.
Yes, and therefore, why is that not an important matter to bring to the attention of your line manager and your chief executive?
Well, they were aware of it. The deficiency notice had been circulated to them, and so they were aware of the deficiency notice. Sorry.
Right, but you didn't think it fit to...
But I didn't explicitly state it in this email because they were already aware of it.
Now, you say that you'll be, in this email, that you would be installing fire action notices in Grenfell Tower, and that would be completed in the next 2 weeks, yes?
I believe they were completed on the 16th, so I was slightly optimistic with my time frame.
Now, was Grenfell Tower prioritised for installation of fire action notices before other high-rise properties?
Yes.
Was that because there had been an LFB deficiency notice?
That would have been one of the factors. We were working towards a programme, as we discussed yesterday, but this became a higher priority for exactly the reasons we just discussed, because it's got a deficiency notice, it's been identified as an issue, and we want to get on and get it in place and close it down. And it's also been expressed by this blog that that's something that the residents would value. So we're trying to progress that.
Yes, I see. So 2 factors, the deficiency notice and the blog.
And the fact that we were already working towards a programme. This was given priority for the factors that we discussed, yeah.
Yes,
but we were looking elsewhere.
Yes, so you had a general programme with these notices on order, but as a result of the deficiency notice and the blog, Grenfell Tower was bumped up to the top of the queue.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's just look then at the last paragraph of this. Say there, Adair Tower in the second line was regularly audited by the LFB, most recent in the month before the fire took place, and no recommendations were made in relation to the design of either staircase or the lift lobbies. Now, although that statement is true as far as it goes, do you agree that in fact it tends to give the impression that the LFB had identified no issues at all in the audit before the fire?
No, I don't think it gives that impression, and that's certainly not what I was trying to convey. And Robert and Barbara knew about the deficiency notice that happened just ahead of the fire, so no, sorry.
Why didn't you mention or perhaps remind them of the fact that the LFB had issued a deficiency notice for Adair Tower before the fire?
I didn't think it was necessary to remind them because, sorry.
Let me just be clear, this email is actually going to Councillor Blakeman, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think the question should be, why wasn't it appropriate to tell her?
Indeed.
Okay. I thought by that time we'd been very, sort of in the wake of the fire, I thought we'd been very clear about the fact that we had a deficiency notice. It had been I'm sure it had been any reports that I had done to board, and Councillor Blakeman sits on the board, and briefing notes to the council, and I thought it was already completely on her radar. I thought she was well aware of it, so I didn't reiterate it.
Well, what gave you to think that?
Well, as I said, after the Adair fire, we were very open and honest about the fact that we'd had a deficiency notice a couple of weeks before, and these were the issues which were identified. We circulated the enforcement notice, I believe, to I think to the board. It was for the company secretary to decide, but yeah,
Yes.
sorry.
The enforcement notice, yes. Are you sure that you circulated the deficiency notices, the Adair Tower deficiency notices that were served before the Adair Tower fire?
Right, no. What I was trying to say was we were very open and honest that we'd received a deficiency notice, and I think we would have set out what was in the deficiency notice. We possibly did not circulate the notice itself, but I'm confident that the reports that I was asked to do for board made reference to the fact that we had received one and the date.
Well, Councillor Blakeman's evidence was, when she was asked about this, was that she wasn't aware of the deficiency notice, and that was at day 135 at page 33, line 24. Are you able to explain, if she's right about that, how come?
I'm not. I'm confident that we were very that was included in lots of information that I was providing, because I was being asked to provide reports to. We'd never had an enforcement notice, and obviously it was a serious fire, so I was being asked to provide updates and on a regular basis to a range of committees and a range of senior managers in the TMO and in the council. I can go back and double check, but it was definitely my understanding that we said that the brigade had audited in, I think, the September, had provided a deficiency notice, and I'm pretty sure we would have set out the detail of the deficiency notice without actually appending it, just not to make it such a long document.
Well, let me try it a different way. Do you accept that the statement you make there, where you confirm that no recommendations were made in relation to the design of either the staircase or the lift lobbies, was only half true because there had been deficiency notices served before the Adair Tower fire? I accept not dealing with fire action notices, but certainly a failure to maintain self-closing devices. And you don't mention that.
I don't actually accept what you're saying, because, no, I mean, I'm talking specifically in relation to the issues that have been raised in the blog, and they weren't mentioned. And at this stage, I'm confident that we've been honest with people about the fact that there was a deficiency notice. There was no secrecy about it. So, no, I don't think I misled people.
Right.
I think I was responding to what I was asked.
Well, let's just take a sideways look at that and look at a document and see how far we go with it. RBK 48049. This is Robert Black's report to scrutiny on the 5th of November 2015.
Okay.
Now that's 6 days after the fire, yes?
Yes.
And it's the minutes of the meeting. We can see who was present. You, I think, were not, or in attendance. Do you know who drafted the minutes for this meeting?
If it's scrutiny, it would have been somebody at the council in their committee team, but I don't know who.
Right. And if we go to page 6 and look at section A7, we can see there the text which deals with the fire at Adair Tower on the 31st of October. But if you scan your eyes down the 3 paragraphs of that, or 4 paragraphs of that text, you will see no reference at all to a prior deficiency notice served by the LFB for Adair Tower, do you?
I don't know.
Can you explain why that is?
No, I wasn't at that meeting, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe I was. It's live issues, so I wasn't asked to do a report. If there'd been a report, I would have been confident that I would have put it in. So, sorry, I can't comment.
Right. Now, can I ask you then to go back to the email we were on?
Okay.
That's TMO 100152114. No, that's the one we're on there. Thank you. And look, please, at the part of the second main paragraph, where you say, the end of the first line, despite extensive discussions. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes, with the LFB and other fire professionals, including our fire consultant and senior consultants from specialist fire engineering companies in relation to Grenfell Tower. At no point has the need to change the stay put strategy even been raised. Who were the senior consultants from specialist fire engineering companies that you had consulted on the subject of stay put at Grenfell?
I hadn't consulted them, but Exova were engaged to work as part of the project team and to work on the fire strategy. That was my understanding for the building, and would have reported ultimately to my colleague Claire Williams. And it's possible that Carl Stokes had some conversation with them, but I was confident that reflected their view, that at no point had they recommended a change in strategy.
Why were you so confident? What was the source of your information that Exova had opined that there was no need to change the stay put strategy?
Well, presumably I would have spoken to Claire Williams, who was kind of my link back to the project team.
Well, I can see that's a reasonable presumption, but did it happen? Did you speak to her? And did she tell you that?
Yes, I'm confident that she did.
Right. And what makes you so confident?
Well, there's no way that I would write this unless I'd had a discussion with somebody. I had no direct relationship with Exova. They were appointed as part of the project team. I wasn't involved in the project team, so most of my information in relation to their discussions would have been me talking to Claire Williams. I wouldn't have gone straight to Exova. That wouldn't have been appropriate.
Right, I see. At any rate, I think you can confirm that you yourself never sought the advice of any specialist fire engineer about the appropriateness of the stay put strategy at Grenfell Tower.
That's right, I didn't.
Can we then go to another email exchange about the same blog at TMO 100152225? This is an exchange between you and Barbara Matthews, also in November 2016. If we scroll, please, down to page 2, you can see that you sent her an email on the 23rd of November 2016, towards the bottom of your screen there. Mm-hmm. Forward, Grenfell Tower again. Draft response for your approval, please. Importance high. Barbara, Robert has asked me to respond to Councillor B. Below is a draft. Can you please let me have any comments or changes so I can finalise and send? And then if we go up to the bottom of page 1, which then continues over to page 2, Barbara Matthews comes back to you and says, Janice, this is a very clear response, please send it. And if we continue on page 2, she goes on. And she says, if you have an idea of the cost to install the fire actions notices across all properties, it would be good to have that. As Robert and I are meeting with Laura tomorrow, and I intend to raise the door closers with Graham's costings. If you don't have the full cost, it would be good to have the cost for purchasing and installing one, and the cost for Grenfell if you have it. Now, Laura is a reference, I'm assuming, is this right, to Laura Johnson?
Yes, I believe
Yes.
so.
Did the costs of fire safety measures have to be approved by Laura Johnson personally?
Not necessarily. It depends what they are.
Right. Well, what was the procedure for seeking approval for costs, for these costs, the cost of installing the fire action notices?
Actually, probably Barbara's better to answer this than me. I would have escalated to Barbara, and as obviously our finance director, she would have known what we could meet from our existing budgets, and she would be clear what needed to be escalated.
Right.
I imagine that in some instances when it's new work, which wasn't budgeted before, then it gets escalated, but actually I don't know the detail. It's beyond my...
No, I understand that. Was funding for these fire safety measures paid for, or to be paid for, out of TMO's budget, or was it paid for outside of that budget?
I don't know the answer to that either. I mean, most of the discussion was about self-closers and not fire action notices, but it was an additional cost. So I'm not sure what they discussed or what they agreed. Apologies.
Right. Very well. And at page 1, we can see your response. You say you have a quote for the printing of the notices and the quantities, but haven't been able to cost the installation. To date, I have used Seamus for installing notices. So this is 24th of November.
Yeah.
When you said you had them on order, presumably the notices were on order, but you still hadn't costed the installation. Was that because at this stage, 24th of November, you hadn't actually organised the installation yet, even at Grenfell?
At Grenfell, we were going to do it. We had the advantage of having a handyman at Grenfell where we don't have in any other estate. So we knew that we had a resource that we could call upon. And eventually, that's what we did elsewhere. We used our estate services assistants and whoever else was available to do the installation, to do it rapidly. So it wasn't costed in the end. We did it within existing resources.
I see. I want to turn to a completely different subject now, which is flat entrance doors, and start within that topic with a subtopic which is the background to the programme. Now, do you agree that the flat entrance door replacement programme started in May 2011?
I believe so, yes.
And that was about the replacement of flat entrance doors in TMO properties, including Grenfell Tower.
It was.
And the doors were going to be made by and sold by Mance Master Door.
Yeah, that was at the end of the procurement. They were the successful contractors.
Yes. Now, let's look at the FRA for Grenfell Tower of the 30th of September 2009, CST 403128, please. And I'd like to go straight into that at page 15. This is part of the action plan, 30th of September 2009. And if you look at the last row, at the bottom of your screen, 3.4, it says, priority rating 3, confirmation should be sought that each dwelling door is to FR30 standard and is provided with a self-closing device. And that's given an amber risk level. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if you go over to page 16, it goes on. Consideration should be given, where not fitted, to the installation of intumescent strips and cold smoke seals to each tenant flat access door by a competent contractor who is fully familiar with BS 476 and appropriate industry standards. It is recommended that a system of formal checks on tenant fire doors and all other fire compartmentation doors is introduced and implemented by the TMO to ensure fire compartments remain fit for purpose. NB, this should extend to all fire doors within the building. Now, as I've just shown you, this had an amber rating, apart from the last one there, which was red. But on the amber, that means that it had to be, that was best practice, wasn't it, on this document? And I've shown you the number 3 priority rating. If we go back perhaps to the foot of 15, we'll see it. That told you that the action had to be taken within 1 month.
Yes.
Yes. Was this a typical comment made within... was this a typical comment made relating to flat entrance doors in FRAs in 2009 across the board?
It was being made in relation to quite a few, which is why I identified a trend and escalated it and said, and I think escalated it to Robert, saying this is something that we're being requested to do.
Yes, thank you. Now, if we go back to page 16, I've read this to you already. There's the recommendation of the system of formal checks. Was that recommendation to commence a system of formal checks on tenant fire doors to ensure fire compartments remain fit for purpose common across fire risk assessments completed by Salvus?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes. Do you recall that you also included the recommendation for a programme of inspections in your annual health and safety report?
I don't remember, but yes, if it's there, it's there.
Well, let's just take a quick look at one. This is the annual health and safety report for 2010-2011, dated May 2011, and that is at TMO 00854-890. Let's go straight in at page 7, paragraph 8.1.8. One recommendation that was made in the high-risk FRA programme, high-risk FRA action plans in relation to the majority of the enclosed blocks was requirement to instigate a programme of inspections, etc.
Yes.
So you had clearly lifted it, I think, from the Salvus, the Stokes Salvus FRA for Grenfell or others, and put it in here, yes?
Yes.
Yes. So can we take it, therefore, that the TMO executive and the board were aware of the recommendation to instigate an inspection programme, at least from May 2011, because you'd reported on it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes. Now, can we go to your first statement, please? TMO 50890, page 3, paragraph 13. This is under the heading Subsequent Modifications Prior to the 2012 to 2016 Refurbishment. And at paragraph 13 you say this: the TMO assigned a project manager to oversee this programme of works, Abigail Acosta, who worked in the Asset, Investment and Engineering Department. While I was involved in the programme to the extent that I was consulted on matters arising relating to health and safety, I was not responsible for overseeing the procurement of the contractor or for overseeing the works. For this reason, my knowledge of the programme is limited to the matters discussed below. On which health and safety matters were you consulted in respect of this programme?
Sorry, I know this is going to be a long answer. So I was the person who identified that this issue was coming up in relation to various properties. Internal discussions led to us having stock condition surveyors who were able to go and actually inspect doors. Based on the information that they provided, we then identified a programme of work that was required. I think that I would have prioritised that programme in terms of risk, although actually I think they managed to turn it around quite quickly. I would have been consulted about the standard of the door, and I would have been invited to some of the progress meetings. I recall that we had an issue with some people, it came to light in the south of the borough that some people were struggling with the weight of the closer, so I was involved in suggesting and I think actually inspecting an assisted closer that we had installed in various locations, and just generally keeping a watch and brief on progress, and then advising the fire risk assessor where we had done these material changes, as these blocks would need their fire risk assessment replaced, reviewed, redone.
Now, were you involved in the decision to appoint Abigail Acosta as the programme's project manager?
No.
You weren't. Now, if you go to your third statement, please, TMO 00847305. This is your third statement. Let's look at page 2, paragraph 6. You say there the fire door replacement project was overseen, the TMO's asset, investment and engineering team.
Yeah.
And then you go on to say, in the third line at the end, I was involved to the extent that I acted as a liaison between the project team and Carl Stokes, the TMO's fire risk assessor. What do you mean by liaison?
I probably don't actually mean liaison. I mean that I would have channeled information about the doors themselves and the standards they reached to Carl to get a view on, and comment. And then also I would have asked him to attend. I know I did ask him to attend the pilot door installation so he could witness that for himself. I think we asked him to comment on the LHC's report whenever they were attending site, identify any improvements, and then I would have fed that back to the project manager. I think ultimately he liaised directly with Abby about specifics of the case. So yeah, it was really confined to that.
I see. Did he provide advice to you on the criteria for prioritising the fitting of new flat entrance doors?
I think he probably did.
And on the standards required for those doors?
Yeah, he would have had some input into that, yeah.
Now, going back to your first statement, if we can, please, page 4, paragraph 20, you say there that after Abigail Acosta was appointed to take over the programme, which is something you refer to at the end of paragraph 19, you say you continued to attend progress meetings with the LHC. You see that?
Yes.
Why did you continue to attend progress meetings?
Because I wanted to know what progress they were making. It was really crucial that we drove this forward swiftly, and I wanted to know if there were any issues or any hold-ups or, really just to monitor the progress of the programme and identify any problems.
So it's more than just liaison, it's actually overseeing the project?
Well, no, I don't think I was overseeing the project. I was trying to make sure that it was moving along and I could escalate it in terms. So Abby's part of asset investment and that directorate if I'm attending these meetings and I think there are problems, then I think it's appropriate that I tell my boss, who's the executive director with health and safety remit, so that she's aware.
So rather than overseeing, monitoring.
Yeah, perhaps.
All right. Did you report on the programme's progress to Anthony Parks before July 15?
Sorry, it would have been Lornette Pemberton at that time.
Lornette Pemberton.
And I'm pretty sure I would have kept her informed of progress, yes.
I see. Did you report to the Health and Safety Executive Team?
Well, Lornette was part of the Health and Safety
Oh, I
Executive
see.
Team.
Did you report to the TMO board?
No, I think reports to board would have been done by Abby, who was obviously was the project manager.
Did you see her reports?
I may have done.
Right. Do you remember whether either Lornette Pemberton or the TMO board ever queried anything in respect of the specifications of the doors?
Not to my knowledge.
So they relied on what you and Abby Acosta were telling them?
Yes, and the technical director at the time, who I think was an interim chap called Simon Throp, he probably presented the reports, and he, I recall, had experience of carrying out the same kind of programme using the LHC at another authority. So I think they probably relied on his experience as well.
Now let's look at the specification next and the appointment of master door. Sticking with your first witness statement as we've got on the screen, can we flip down to paragraph 22? It's at the very foot of the page, very foot of page 4, and you say there, I've also been shown a brief specification pricing document sent by Abigail Acosta to John Tapscott of Mance Master Door Limited on 5th January 2011, and you exhibit it. Let's look at the exhibit. TMO 100499975. Is that the document you're referring to here as JW1?
Yes, must be.
If we can go to, well, I think the key part of it is actually at page 45. I'm showing you page 1, but in fact I think we probably want page 45, pricing document, fixed rate for individual fire door replacement and associated works. And if we scroll down to 46 and 47, you can see, I think, the rest of it. That's the document, is it? The brief specification and pricing document?
I believe so, yes.
Yes. Were you involved in drafting any part of this brief?
No.
No. Do you know who was?
I don't know.
Do you know who it was who was responsible for ensuring that the brief met industry standards?
No. Somebody within the technical division who were managing the project, I presume.
Right. You don't know who that was?
No, sorry, I don't.
Now, you say, and you said this a little bit earlier, that you would have been consulted about the standard of the doors. Why were you particularly consulted on the standard of the doors?
Well, they might have run it past me and said, sought confirmation. My understanding was we wanted FT30S doors, which had cold smoke seals, intermittent strips, and self-closers, and that's all I would have been able to provide them. Is just a high level, and any door furniture would have to meet the appropriate standards, etc.
Just exploring that a bit further, where did that understanding come from?
Well, that was my understanding of what was required on means of escape front entrance doors.
Indeed, and what was the source of that understanding?
At that time, I can't recall, to be honest. I don't know where I got it from. It's what I've always understood, but as I sit here, I can't think which document, sorry.
Would it be approved document B, perhaps?
Probably is.
Were you familiar with approved document B?
Yeah, I mean, I knew of it, and I consulted it sometimes, but it wasn't something that I found particularly accessible, so I would have asked for advice, usually.
Were you shown this document, the brief specification and pricing document, at the time, January 2011?
I honestly don't recall.
Right. You weren't, I think, able to give me a name of the person who was involved. Might it have been somebody called Graham Sidaway? He was a TMO asset strategy manager.
I'm not sure. I think he was. I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm speculating. Sorry.
You don't remember having any discussions with Mr. Sidaway about this document?
I know he was involved in instructing RAND, the stock condition surveyors who went and did the checks, but I don't know if his remit extended to this. I'm sorry.
Right, I see. Were you aware that although the London Housing Consortium, that's LHC, were involved, it was for the TMO to specify and set the standards required for the flat entrance doors to be installed as part of this replacement programme?
I'm not sure if I was aware, but that doesn't seem unreasonable.
Right. Did you ever discuss with Abigail Acosta specifically the fire performance requirement for the flat entrance doors before the issue of the tender?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Do you know if anybody sought Carl Stokes' advice about the standards required for the flat entrance doors before the tender was issued?
I would have thought that they did, but
You don't remember?
I really don't. Sorry. It's
Right.
just.
Let's then look at the specification. Can we go to the your third statement, please? TMO 008470305, page 4, paragraph 16. If you look there, you say, it was always my understanding that the new replacement door sets installed by Mance Master Door were required to be self-closing FD30 doors fitted with intumescent strips and cold smoke seals and were therefore fully compliant. Mm-hmm. I do not believe there was ever any debate about whether the doors required self-closing devices. While I was not the project manager, I'm confident that Mance Master Door and LHC would always have been expected to provide certification to the TMO. Mm-hmm. How did you initially obtain the knowledge about what was required for compliant flat entrance doors? You mentioned ADB earlier on. Mm-hmm. And was there anything else, any other guidance document you looked at?
I would have looked at them all, but I can't remember which one I took my information from.
Right.
I mean, I would have looked at the course and the sleeping guide and everything that was available.
Right.
But I just, sorry, it's such a long time ago, I can't recall.
You said earlier in your oral evidence just this morning that you knew that they should be FD30S. That was at on the raw transcript, page 38, line 12, with cold smoke seals, intumescent strips and self-closers. But here you're referring to FD30 doors with intumescent strips and cold smoke seals. Can you account for that difference?
Well, I don't see it as a difference. It's FD30 as opposed to FD60 or FD120. That's the fire ratedness, the 30 minutes. And the fact that I'm saying they have to have intumescent strips, cold smoke seals, and be self-closing makes them an FD30S. I've just called it FD30 in terms of 30 and not an FD60. I've just differentiated, that's all.
Right, why didn't you say FD30S there?
Well, I could have done, and then I could have not provided the other bit. I thought it would be more helpful to outline the other factors, but...
Did you actually think about that precise point when you were writing this part of your third statement?
I thought it was important to be explicit, yes.
Now, you say, did you discuss that standard, first of all? Did you discuss that standard with anybody from Salvus once they'd raised the issue in their fire risk assessments in 2009 to 2010?
I think it's quite likely I did, but at this stage I can't really recall. I mean, it may be in some of the minutes. I think it's very likely I did because they were questioning the standard of the door, and I would have needed to know what standard they required us to meet.
Yes. Can we go back a page in this, your third witness statement, please, to page 3, paragraph 12? You say there, I recall that Carl produced a document for the TMO entitled Criteria for Prioritising the Fitting of New Entrance Doors to Flats, JW3. Mm-hmm. You see that, criteria?
Yes.
Did you instruct Carl Stokes to draft those criteria?
I don't know whether I did for sure. I think. No, sorry, I don't think I can give you a definite answer because I don't recall.
Right. Well, we'll come to the document in a moment. Can we first look, please, at what Carl Stokes says in his second witness statement? This is at CST 3030186, page 15, paragraph 58. And if you look at the first line, he says, along with my letter of 24th June 2011, I did author the document titled Criteria for Prioritising the Fitting of New Entrance Doors to Flats at the request of Miss Wray. So he says you did ask him.
And it's quite possible that I did. I just can't remember. If he
see.
says it, then I believe him.
Right, so you don't challenge that.
No.
Now, he says that he did so to assist, as you can see, to assist the KCTMO navigate its way through the door replacement process. Do you agree with that?
I think we'd identified the information that came back from RAND showed that we needed a programme of, I think ultimately it was about 1,200 doors, which across quite a number of blocks. So we were trying to prioritise those in terms of installation. And I must have asked him to give me a steer on how he thought we should progress them.
And just to be clear, RAND had done the stock survey?
Yes.
Yeah. Was this document to assist you personally in navigating your way through the door replacement process, or was it for somebody else's benefit?
I'm thinking that it was to give a steer to the project manager to say, actually, you might want to consider these priorities, you might want to consider this as the programme.
Right. I mean, the reason I ask this is it looks a little bit more than simply a liaison role that you are occupying in relation to the flat entrance door replacement programme.
No, I mean, I was probably making recommendations, but it wasn't my call.
Right. Can we take it that you asked him to draft these criteria so that you could be satisfied that the doors met the requisite fire safety standards?
I don't think that was the criteria for prioritising the fitting of the new doors. It was my understanding that what he had provided, unless you tell me differently, was doors in this kind of location potentially are high risk. So, to go through the blocks, identify whether we do high risk, a high rise first, or whether we do specialised housing, or to look at the different kinds of doors and different kinds of locations and prioritise those so that we could put that into a programme. That's my understanding. Did you
have a discussion with Carl Stokes about the criteria that he produced?
I imagine I did, but I had no recollection of it. Sorry.
Right. Let's look at it. It's CST 402660. And that's the first page. It's a letter dated the 10th of November 2010. Mm-hmm. Subject, the replacement of fire doors to some entrance doors of residential flats. Criteria for prioritising the fitting of new entrance doors to flats. Can you see that?
Yes.
And then if we go a little bit lower down on the page, 8, blocks where refurbishment of the common landings and staircases is overdue. You see that? Mm-hmm. And then if you go over under options, you can see it says... number 1, you can see it on your screen, replace the old door and frame, the door set, with new 30-minute fire-rated door set incorporating intumescent strips and cold smoke seals, FD30S, with a self-closing device. Mm-hmm. And then if we go over to page 2, replace the old door, this is under item 2, replace the old door with new 30-minute fire-rated door inserted in the old frames incorporating intumescent strips and cold smoke seals in the new door FD30S with a self-closing device. Mm-hmm. You see that?
Yeah.
And then number 3, fit intumescent strips, if not fitted, and cold smoke seals in the existing door and a self-closing device to the door. So, was it your understanding after looking at this letter that the doors that were to be replaced needed to meet the standard of an FD30S door?
Yes.
Yes. And did you understand what the S signified?
I did, yes.
What was that?
Cold smoke seals.
30-minute fire-rated door with intumescent strips and cold smoke seals.
Yes.
To give it its full description. Right.
Yes, which is what I tried to reflect in my statement.
So I understand that. So yes, I see. So FD30 plus the other elements equals FD30S.
Indeed.
Yes. Were you aware that the suffix S meant that a door had been tested for cold smoke leakage?
Yes.
Yes. Did you know what the S signified before you received this letter from Carl Stokes, or as a result of it?
I've known before.
You'd known before?
Yeah.
Did Carl Stokes discuss with you the need for doors to be tested for cold smoke leakage as a separate test from the test for fire resistance?
I don't recall having that conversation, but I can't say.
Had you discussed that topic with anyone from Salvus Consulting before November 2010?
Again, I can't say.
When Carl Stokes sent you this document, what did you do with it? Or what did you do with the information that I've just shown you under the three options there?
To be honest, I think I probably focused more on the first page.
The priorities?
Yes.
Right.
So obviously where we've got blocks with a single means of escape, it helped. That was to feed into the programme so that the programme reflected
Right.
the highest risk at the beginning of the programme.
Did you have any discussions with either Abigail Acosta or Simon Throp that the standard required for flat entrance doors was FD30S?
I'm sure I would have.
Did you pass this letter to them and highlight those three options at the foot of page 1 and at the top of page 2 that I've read to you?
I think it's very likely that I did.
Right. Now, if we then move to the next year, March 2010, CST 30133074, we can see that you had a meeting with Simon Throp and Carl Stokes on the 10th of March 2011. And the reason I suggest that to you is because of what we see on the screen. Here is a letter dated the 7th of March from Carl Stokes to you, updated after meeting with Simon Throp on Thursday, 10th of March 2011. Do you recall that meeting?
Not especially, no.
If we go down to page 2, at the bottom of the page, please, bottom of the letter, you can see there, after his signature, updated information after 10th March meeting with J. Wray and S. Throp. Simon confirmed that the replacement doors would have self-closers and cold smoke seals fitted to them. Also, the letterboxes would be fire-rated. It was also agreed that I would be present when the first doors are installed, and Abigail Acosta, the project manager, will arrange the dates and times, etc. Why were you at that meeting? Was it because you were there in your monitoring role?
Yeah, I
As you
believe
described
so.
it earlier.
Yeah, I believe so.
And why was Carl Stokes present at that meeting?
I'm presuming that Simon Throp asked to meet him, but I can't say at this stage.
Right. Now, Carl Stokes said in his evidence, and it's day 138, page 39, lines 1 to 4, that he thought he was there to look at the criteria of the doors. Do you agree?
Sorry, the document with his criteria document, did it come before or after this? Does that make sense?
Well, his criteria document was from November.
Right, okay.
His evidence was that he thought he was there in order to discuss the criteria, the fire safety criteria of the doors.
Right, the specification of the door.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, well, that would make sense.
Yes. Did he mention at that stage the requirement for a fire door to undergo testing for cold smoke leakage separate from a test for fire resistance?
I honestly couldn't say.
Right. Now, if we go back up to page 1 of this letter, please, look at paragraph numbered 1.
Yeah.
It says there, can it please be confirmed that the doors are to be fitted under the contract that are the 30-minute fire doors, FD30 version, and could the company forward all the relevant documentation to confirm this? You see that? Mm-hmm. And then if you go on, if you look at the third paragraph from the bottom, that follows on from a reference to Mance Master Door saying on its website that its doors meet the requirement of Part M of the building regulations, and particularly had been tested to BS 476 Part 22. Mm-hmm. Did you ever ask Mance Master Door for a confirmation and certification?
I don't know that I did. I naturally assumed that the project manager would have done.
You naturally assumed that, did she?
I don't know.
Did
I don't
you
know
ask
she
her to?
did, and I don't know whether I asked her, but that's the role of the project manager, is to make sure that the specification and all the documentation is in place.
Right. Did you think that Mr. Stokes' advice in paragraph 1 there, that the doors should be confirmed to FD30 doors, was at odds with the letter that he'd sent you on the 10th of November 2010, setting out the requirements for doors to be FD30S?
I didn't, because I would have probably read it in the context of everything else he said in the letter, where he's obviously raising anxiety that there's no mention of the other aspects in terms of...
Yes,
Yes.
indeed. Did you note that there was now no reference to the need for the doors to have cold smoke seals?
Sorry, when you say no reference, do you mean in his point 1?
Yes.
Well, as I say, I'd have read the context of the letter. He's identifying issues that would be going back to Simon Throp and Abigail Acosta to address. So I assumed that any of his concerns were being raised with them and being addressed by them.
Well, yes, but did you not notice that there was a degree of inconsistency between what Mr. Stokes was telling you in the November 2010 letter and this March letter about the fire safety standards for these doors?
Can I see the second page again, please?
Yes, of course. Page 2, please.
I don't think I would have picked up on there being a discrepancy, because he's still reiterating the need for them to have intumescent strips and closers, and he's kind of raising his anxiety that that's not necessarily clear from the website, or that's my interpretation.
I mean, this isn't the most crystal clear document, is it?
No.
No. And did you not then go back to him and ask him for very clear specification or advice on what specification was required for these doors, so that Simon Throp and Abigail Acosta could go back to Mance Master Door and say, are your doors FD30S?
I don't know whether I did or I didn't, but he was very clear in his criteria initially, and that was circulated, and that's what they should have been working to.
Now, while we're on this page, he does go on to ask, as you can see from item 2, for confirmation that the doors will meet all the requirements of the current building regulations and HM Government Fire Safety Risk Assessment Guide for Sleeping Accommodation. This includes hinges, letterbox, call letter plates, and any securing or locking mechanisms. Yes. And also, in the middle of the page, towards the bottom of your screen there, he says he has attached the relevant pages from approved document B, Fire Safety Volume 2, for your information, Section 5, General Provisions, and Appendix B, Fire Doors. And I draw your attention to items 5.2, 5.5, 5.6, and 5.11 of Section 5, General Provisions, also to item 2 of Appendix B and item 2A of Table B1. Do you remember whether you looked at that guidance to which he had drawn your attention?
I don't recall, sorry.
Right. Let's look at CST 706. This is a document which Mr. Stokes told us he thought was the document that he had attached. Okay. That's day 138, page 41 at line 24 to 25. And you can see at the top, he says, "Good morning. After the meeting yesterday, here is relevant information regarding flat entrance doors. I have highlighted the two parts in green, Carl. Do you think you read this?"
Yeah, I would have read everything he sent me.
Right. If we turn to the next page, please, page 2, you can see that he's marked in green paragraph 2 there. And if you turn to page 3 in this exhibit, under Table B, Fire Doors, Section 2A, he's marked that in green as well.
Yes.
Did you look at that when he sent this to you, do you think?
Yes.
Did you read anything that wasn't marked in green?
Not in detail, no, probably not.
Right. Did you, if you go back to page 2, did you look, for example, at paragraph 1 on the top of the left-hand column? All fire doors should have the appropriate performance given in table B1, and then there's the data set out there. Did you see that? Did you read it?
I really don't remember if I read it. I would have passed it to the technical people who were specifying and procuring the works, and I would expect them to incorporate anything that he's highlighting.
Right.
We've asked him for his view. He's provided it. Now they need to incorporate it. I suspect that I did, but it depends what other mayhem was happening on that
Yes.
day, I suspect.
I mean, did you understand that the smoke test was a separate test from the fire resistance test?
I can't say whether I understood that then. Obviously, the world knows differently now, but so I can't really tell you whether I did know that then.
Right.
It's possible that I did, but I can't confirm it.
Right. Now, if we look at paragraph 2 on that page, which he's highlighted in green, it says, all fire doors should be fitted with a self-closing device except for fire doors to cupboards and to service ducts, which are normally kept locked shut. And fire doors within flats, self-closing devices are still necessary on flat entrance doors. You see that?
Yeah.
And then over on page 3, he's marked paragraph 2A in table B1, as I've shown you. That shows and tells you in clear terms, doesn't it, that the minimum fire resistance of a door, if it separates a flat from a space in common use, is FD30S, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So do you agree that you were made aware that the requirements for flat entrance doors were FD30S?
For new flat entrance doors, yes.
Yes. Now, given that he had asked Mance Master Door to confirm that the doors were FD30 in the part of the letter I showed you, I think you accept that there was some degree of confusion in his correspondence. Yes?
If you consider all of the correspondence, I think it's clear, but in the point that you've highlighted to me, it does say FD30.
Did you follow up with him and ask him why his letter had said FD30, but the technical data he'd marked up for your attention said FD30S?
No, because it was my understanding that we needed FD30S, as I've said before. And he has appended this, and it's gone to the technical people. So I don't think it's his wording isn't fabulous, but I don't think it's that ambiguous. I think it's still clear.
And after you received this data, did you send it to Abigail Acosta or Simon Throp, or discuss it with them?
I would have sent it to Simon Throp, I'm sure.
But without further discussion?
I can't say at this stage. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is, Mr. Millett. I think it's time we had a break, don't you, Mr. Wray? We'll stop now. We'll resume, please, at 25 to 12. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you very much. Thank you. 25 to 12. Would you ask Ms. Wray to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, Ms. Wray, ready to carry on?
Yes.
Well done, thank you. Yes, Mr.
Ms. Wray, in general terms, can you help me? Whose job was it within the TMO to ensure that the contract with Masterdoor specified the correct and compliant specification for flat entrance doors?
I would have thought that was with the technical division who were responsible for the contract. They can seek advice, but in terms of ensuring that the contract says the right thing, that I believe sits with them.
And to the best of your knowledge, given your involvement, as you've explained it with this project, who were the people in the technical team?
Well, ultimately, Simon Throp was the interim director at that stage, and Abby Acosta, he appointed, I think, Abby Acosta as a project manager. There may have been other people involved, I can't recall, but certainly those two.
So Abby Acosta would have been at least in part responsible for specifying the correct specification for the flat entrance doors.
I believe so, yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, I'm going to continue with the topic, but the emphasis may change slightly. It looks from the letter that we've been looking at that it was agreed at this meeting that Carl Stokes would attend the installation of the first door.
Yes, the pilot door.
Why was that? Why was it necessary that he should?
I don't know if it was necessary, but he was going to be going back to properties where these doors had been installed, and he was then going to be asking me lots of questions about what we'd installed and what standards they met. So it seemed sensible for him to be present when to actually witness an installation, so he could see whether it was being done to the standard that he felt was appropriate to meet the required fire ratedness.
Now, can we go to your third statement, please? TMO 00847305 again, and now look at page 3, paragraph 12. And I'm going to ask you to look at the end of it, at the end of the third line. You say, then on 30th April 2011, Carl Stokes wrote to me summarising the relevant items of the draft Fire Safety and Purpose-Built Blocks of Flats guide, which could affect the door replacement programme. Mm-hmm. Let's look at that letter. It is at TMO 00847318. As you can see, it's dated 30th of April 2010. Mm-hmm. I think that's an error for 2011, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And you've said so, paragraph 12 of your third statement. Now, did you ask him to provide you with the advice contained in this letter, or did he volunteer it?
I think he probably volunteered it.
Right. Looking at well, in what way did you use the advice that he provided to you in this letter? Do you remember?
Not especially, no.
Right. Looking at the advice at page 1, if we look at the last paragraph, you see he's picking up paragraph 68.2 of the LGA guide, or perhaps it's not the LGA guide. He's picking up 68.2 of what I think is a draft of the LGA guide as at April 2011, and you can see that from the heading of the letter. Yes. Yes, and it says, as flat entrance doors are required to be self-closing, there is a risk that any self-locking security devices fitted to the doors could accidentally lock residents outside of their own flats. Now, he then goes on to explain the practical experiences of living with a self-closer, but he doesn't provide any further, more detailed guidance about what is required by way of self-closers, does he?
No.
Did you ask for any further guidance on that?
I don't recall asking for further guidance, no.
Did you need any further guidance? Or did you already know that flat entrance doors had to be self-closing?
Well, yes, of course.
Right. Then if we continue, he goes on to say, as I've said, that there's a risk that self-locking security devices fitted to doors could accidentally lock residents out of their own flats. And then he goes on, as well as being a general nuisance for residents who may leave their keys inside the flat, there's also a risk during a fire if residents leave their flat and dependent family members remain inside the flat. The danger in these circumstances is that residents may resort to removing or disconnecting the self-closing device. On that last sentence there, was that risk something you were already aware of?
I'm not sure if I was aware of it then, but I certainly have been made aware of it subsequently.
We say subsequently, do you mean
Well,
at any...
in the intervening period.
In the intervening period between the 30th of April 2011 and the date of the fire?
Yes.
Yes. Were you aware, or were you made aware of any other risks with self-closing devices whereby they could be removed or disconnected?
Sorry, I'm aware that there is a risk of them being removed or disconnected, and where people feel they're a nuisance, they may be more inclined to do that. And I know that when we've tried to get access to dwellings to replace self-closers, sometimes that's been quite challenging because people prefer not to have them replaced. We also, I recall, had a discussion about whether external self-closers could be fitted because they would have the advantage of being able to be inspected easily, but I think we had some concerns that might create a security issue, so that wasn't progressed along those lines, really.
Yes. Now, we can see from the letter that Mr. Stokes is advising you from a then draft of the LGA guide.
Yes.
Unless you tell me otherwise, I'm going to proceed on the basis that there was no material difference between the draft as it stood in April 2011 and the draft and the final version as published later that year. But can I show you what it says? I think the numbering changes. HOM 3045964. And if we go in that document to page 98, please. Let's look at paragraph 62.17. Towards the bottom of the page. And it says, it will not be practicable to test existing doors to confirm their actual fire resistance. Therefore, 3 options exist in relation to original fire-resisting doors that do not meet current benchmark standards. These are, first bullet, accept the door as it is, provided it is a good fit in its frame and that it satisfies the standard applicable to fire-resisting doors at the time of construction of the building or manufacture of the door, notional FD30 door. Upgrade the door by, for example, fitting intumescent strips and smoke seals along the edges and fitting a protected letterbox. Upgraded FD30S door. Third bullet, replace the door with an FD30S door replacement. FD30S door.
Yeah.
And then over the page at 62.19, it says this: it is essential that irrespective of which option is chosen, fire-resisting flat entrance doors and doors provided to protect common corridors, lobbies and stairways should be fitted with suitable positive action self-closing devices. The self-closing device should be capable of closing the door in its frame from any angle and overcoming the resistance of any latch. Rising butt hinges used to be acceptable under previous benchmark guidance, but are no longer considered suitable devices because they are unreliable in the effective closure of a door. The fitting, this is 62.20, the fitting of suitable self-closing devices, whether to replace rising butt hinges pictured below or because the doors are not fitted with self-closing devices, must, in bold, be undertaken in the short term as a matter of priority. Now, I've shown you what Mr. Stokes brought to your attention in the 30th of April 2011 letter. Did Mr. Stokes bring those paragraphs to your attention? He doesn't in the letter, but did he otherwise at that time?
He may have done.
Right.
But I would have read them.
You would have read them. Did you go and check the draft guidance as it stood in April 2011, or the final guidance, which is in, so far as we can tell, the same terms, later that year, on this point?
Likely to, yeah.
Likely to. Do you remember doing so?
Not in 2011, no,
Right.
But I'm pretty confident I would have.
Right. So can we proceed then on the basis that you knew from April 2011, or perhaps later in the year, but certainly within 2011, of the requirements I've just read to you?
Yes.
Yes. Now then, let's move on to the installation. The first door in the flat fire door replacement programme across the stock was on the 11th of May 2011, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it sticks in the memory because it was installed at flat 16 Grenfell Tower, wasn't it?
I know it was Grenfell Tower. I wouldn't remember the flat, but yes,
Yes.
if you say that's fine.
Yes. Can I take you to the letter that you received from Carl Stokes after that installation? CST 50991. 23rd of May 2011 is the date, and the title, subject, the fitting of the first replacement entrance door to flat 16 Grenfell Tower. Dear Janice, thank you for inviting me to view the installation of the first replacement entrance door to flat 16 of Grenfell Tower on the 11th of May. My comments are limited to that of the fire requirements needed to be compliant with the Fire Safety Order 2005. And then he goes on, from the information given to me by the installation team on site and the technical sheets beforehand by yourself, the door fitted was a fire-rated version FD30 of the Shore Door GRP range, manufactured and installed by Mance Master Door. And it goes on, the entrance door consisted of a GRP composite door leaf within an insulated, reinforced PVCU frame. The door was fitted with a self-closing device, intumescent and cold smoke seals, and a fire-rated letterbox, all in accordance with the details supplied beforehand. The door set has, according to the manufacturer's information, been successfully tested to BS 476 Part 22. Now, did you take that statement there as Mr. Stokes's indication, or statement perhaps, that the doors complied with all fire safety and building regulations applicable to those doors?
I would have done.
Now, having been told that the doors were a fire-rated version FD30, did you think that that was at odds with his previous advice of the 10th of November 2010, and indeed parts of approved document B, which he had provided to you?
No, because he was then confirming the self-closing device, the intumescent cold smoke seals, the fire-rated letterbox, which my understanding was made it an FD30 door set.
And did you understand that they had been tested for cold smoke leakage or not?
I can't recall. You asked me this before, and I couldn't recall then either. Sorry.
Right. So did you read this, and I think I'm getting your evidence as follows, but correct me if I'm wrong, you read this, that the door itself was FD30, but because of it being fitted with a self-closing device, intumescent and cold smoke seals, and a fire-rated letterbox, it became FD30S.
I read this that it was an FD30S, but he was highlighting that it was 30-minute fire-rated and not 60 or 120.
Right. And again, you didn't, I take it, query that meaning with Mr. Stokes, or ask anybody in the technical team to take that up with Mance Master Door?
I can't recall doing.
Right. Now, after the doors were installed, were you aware that there were problems with the self-closing devices in some buildings?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't. Right. Well, let's just double-check that. Can we look at your third witness statement, please? TMO 008473005, page 7, paragraph 25.
Sorry, with the exception of the closer, the weight of the closer, which I mentioned earlier. That's the one thing I was aware of in relation to some people who struggled.
Yes.
That's the one thing that I had been made aware of.
Right. Well, let's just be clear about that, because I was about to correct you, but I think you've virtually done that. Here at paragraph 25 of your third statement, you say, I do recall that some elderly residents found the new doors difficult to open on the basis that they were perceived as being too heavy. As a result, assisted closers were fitted to these particular doors. These assisted closers are the only alternative self-closer that I'm aware of being provided to residents. I do not believe any of these residents lived at Grenfell Tower. So those are the issues that arose.
That's what I was made aware of.
Yes, I see. Now, can we look at TMO 1400915? And I think we could pick this up quickly. This is the Health and Safety Committee meeting, 8th of September 2011. If we go to page 3, item 10, halfway down the page, you advised that the front door replacement works were progressing well. And then you say some issues had arisen with door closers proving too strong for some of the very elderly and frail residents. The manufacturer stroke installer has been asked to recommend an alternative door closer that can be used in these cases. How is it that you became aware of that problem?
I think it was our tenant liaison officer, who I think was Lorna Cunningham, that these residents had contacted her, and she'd visited them and saw that there was a problem, and she'd raised it with me. And I'd sort of gone back to Abby to say, what can we do here? Is this a possibility? So something was trialled, and I was actually asked to attend the trial door, and I got feedback from the residents and some of our neighbours upstairs also, and they were very happy with the alternative. And I just remember that because they were really nice people. And
how widespread was the problem across the stock?
I'm not aware that it was widespread. And I do recall asking that records be kept of all the locations where these were installed. But in truth, I don't know whether that happened or whether it was put on Keystone or anywhere. But I felt it was important because there was potentially a different level of maintenance that would be required at those locations.
Was this question discussed at any of the fire flat front door replacement programme project meetings in 2011?
I don't know. I would have thought it would have been, but I probably by then wasn't able to go to all of them, so I don't know for sure. But I know that we did progress in that way, and it was the residents were happy with the alternative.
Right. And do you remember asking Carl Stokes for his advice on this question of removing or replacing self-closing devices where the residents were elderly or frail?
I think I might have done, yeah. In fact, to be fair, it may have been him who suggested assisted closer. I mean, I'm sure he would have been really robust in saying they can't be removed without having an alternative closer fitted.
Yes, let's just look at an email run on this topic. And perhaps in light of your evidence, we can take this quite quickly. Can we go to TMO 00867 And let's just go to page 1 of that. It starts on page 3, where you were copied into a problem arising at Frinstead House and also at King Charles House with residents in their 80s. You may remember that. You asked for Carl Stokes for advice, and then we get his advice on page 1. And it comes from Carl Stokes, page 1. Mm-hmm. Comes from Carl Stokes to Abby Acosta, copy to you, 4th of August 2011. Abby, after our telephone conversation earlier, removing the self-closing device from the flat entrance door, I would recommend that this does not happen. The building regulations are quite specific on the requirements for self-closing devices to be fitted to flat entrance doors, and as the replacement doors meet the requirements of the current building regulations and other fire safety guidance, to remove the self-closer may cause insurance and other legal safety problems. For instance, you have removed a preventive safety element and consequently you have now downgraded the structural elements of the protected staircase. I would strongly recommend that you check with your building's insurers about removing the self-closing device and ask for their opinion and if this affect any insurance cover. You remember receiving that advice, I'm assuming?
I think so, or I've certainly reread it recently, yeah.
Yes. And he also sends a letter of the 4th of August at TMO 00867 and here he provides a summary of what he had promised he would provide, which is the guidance. And in the first paragraph on the first page, he says, in the third line, you have asked if a self-closing device fitted to a flat entrance door located in a protected staircase or protected corridor can be removed so as to aid the person opening the door. Was that a question you asked him?
I think that was a question either coming possibly from Lorna, from the resident liaison officer who'd spoken directly to the residents. So I think that's where that question came from.
Right. Do you recall reading this letter?
Yeah.
Right. And he then sets out the guidance contained in text contained in the RRO, mm-hmm. which you, I think, were aware of even before you received this letter. Mm-hmm. Yes. And he says in the second paragraph, the answer to your question is that if a self-closing device is fitted to a flat entrance door located in a protected staircase or a protected corridor, then it should not be removed. The reason for this answer is that, and he sets out the text of the RRO, and goes on to say afterwards, I believe that by removing the self-closing device from a fire door, this could place other residents of the building at risk, because if a fire was to occur within the flat, the entrance door would not close automatically, so the smoke and flame could enter the common parts, over the page, page 2, common parts of the building and would not be confined to the dwelling of origin. This is because there was a device fitted and you have now disabled or removed it. And then he goes on to set out Article 32.3 of the FSO and the responsible person. As you can see on the rest of that page, if we scroll down, please, to the rest of page 2, and then over onto page 3. See that? So just pausing there, you understood from receiving this letter on the 4th of August 2011 that removing a self-closing device was a serious matter.
Yes.
It would have been a serious infringement of the responsible person's obligations under the RRO.
Indeed.
And he then quotes, as I've shown you, from the building regulations, and particularly the beginning of the long italicized text a third of the way down your screen. The flat entrance doors are critical to the safety of the common parts in the event of a fire within a flat. The doors must be self-closing and afford an adequate degree of fire resistance. And then he goes on to publish, to quote from the newly published LGA guide there, and then you can see the conclusion. And he says under the conclusion, I would advise that self-closing devices where fitted to a flat entrance door located in a protected staircase or a protected corridor should not be removed because the existing situation is being made worse, a building regulations term, and by removing the self-closing device, you could be, quote, placing one or more relevant persons at risk of death or serious injury in the case of a fire, close quotes. There are alternative solutions to removing the self-closing device from the flat entrance door. If you would like me to attend a meeting with the providers of the doors or with yourselves, please instruct me. So is it clear from this that you were aware not only of the importance of the need to make sure that there were self-closing devices in place, but also that they were adequately maintained?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, he goes on to say, at the very end, the above is a personal view only, and a definitive answer can only be given by a court of law, but I've undertaken the role of an enforcement officer for the FSO and carried out legal proceedings against owners / occupiers of premises. I'd recommend you seek legal opinion from your solicitors and that your insurers are contacted for their opinion, because by removing the self-closing devices, this could affect clauses of the building's insurance. If you so wish, the enforcing authority for the FSO, London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, could be contacted for their opinion. Now, although he says here that it's only a personal view, am I right in thinking that you had no reason, reading this, not to follow the opinion he'd given as your fire safety consultant, so to speak?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. And you had no reason yourself to disagree with that view, is that right?
No. I think he got slightly carried away with his answer, but it's all there. Yeah.
Well, it's all there and more.
Yes.
Did you arrange a meeting to discuss the alternative solutions as he had invited you to?
I have no idea, but I do know that we did install the automated self-closers that I spoke of earlier.
Did you forward this letter to anybody else, do you think?
Well, it's copied to Abigail Acosta,
Yes,
so
indeed.
It's possible that I also sent a copy to Simon Throp. I'm not sure.
Simon Throp, you think, as well as Abby Acosta, who you rightly point out was copied in on it. So far as you are concerned, were you satisfied that she, as the project manager for the programme, understood what Mr. Stokes was advising in this letter?
I think so, yes. I think he's been quite clear.
Now, moving on in time then, we come to November 2011. TMO 140959, please. First page, you'll see this is the minute of a committee, a TMO Health and Safety Committee meeting, 17th November 2011. You are present and in the chair is Lornette Pemberton. If we go down to page 3, please, item 8, you can see there the second paragraph down. Janice advised that the flat entrance door replacement works were still progressing well, with close to 700 of the current 1,200 doors in the programme having been installed. The issues surrounding the strength of the door closers proving too strong for some of the very elderly and frail residents seems to have been resolved, with an alternative closer being used in these scenarios. When the alternative self-closing devices were installed, did you ask Carl Stokes or anybody else to check that they had been installed properly and were compliant with the LGA guidance and his own 4th of August 2011 letter advice?
I don't know if I did.
Right, why is that? Why didn't you do that?
I just can't remember if I did, is what I
Right.
should have said.
Was anybody required to monitor this question after the door replacement programme was completed? In other words, monitor to ensure that self-closers were not disabled?
We had a kind of range of opportunities where we had access to dwellings, and we tried to take advantage of those to make sure that self-closers were in place or that they were working effectively. We did heavily concentrate on void dwellings where we were doing major works. It's something that we would look at. What we tried to do at one stage was talk to our gas servicing contractors who are required to go into a substantial volume of our dwellings on a yearly basis to see if it's something we could ask them to incorporate, obviously with an additional degree of training. And I think it was something that some other people in the sector had managed to instigate, so we were quite keen on that. Unfortunately, our gas servicing contractors weren't happy to oblige, so we were always looking at other ways in order to assess self-closers. Carl was doing a percentage, so we were sort of, and it was piecemeal and it wasn't a consistent programme. And as you know, even when we ultimately asked the council if we could do a programme, their view at that stage was not. So we were trying to take advantage of all of the opportunities that presented themselves, but we didn't have a holistic programme.
Well, thank you for that. And that answers a number of questions we may have for you later on, but we will come back to that topic perhaps later. Focusing on the summer of 2011, do you remember that there was a self-closing device coming out of the door in King Charles House in June of that year as a problem?
No.
The reason I suggest it might be memorable is because it was discussed in a progress meeting that you attended the next month. If we can go to that, just to refresh your recollection, it's at TMO 1400887. On the first page, you'll see that this is a progress meeting of the 7th of July 2011, at which Abigail Acosta was present, as were you. You see that?
Yes.
And Lorna Cunningham, who I think was the TLO, wasn't she?
She was,
The RLO. Now, you can see that there. And if you go in that, please, to page 4, you'll see NB confirmed, at the very top of the page, NB confirmed that a new closer for 13 King Charles House had been ordered and will arrange for making good with residents in due course. Do you remember whether at that stage that the fact that there'd been a problem with one flat indicated a wider problem with these door closers across the estate?
No, as far as I'm aware, this was a one-off.
Right. So far as you were aware, that was a one-off. Can we go to TMO 00867783? This is an email run later in the month of July 2011. And at the bottom of page 3, we'll see that there's an email not copied to you from Carl Stokes to Abby Acosta, 21st of July 2011, new doors at Grenfell Tower. And he says, on Tuesday, I was at Lancaster West and was informed that the self-closing device on 3 of the new flat entrance doors have come away from the door. That is the same problem. This is the same problem as in King Charles House. Are you aware of this recurring fault? And then that is then the subject of further discussion. If you scroll up page 3, you can see that Abby Acosta comes back and says, Carl, hi, no, I'm not. Thanks for bringing to my attention. I will raise as concern at our next site meeting. And then if you scroll on up, you can see how that resolves itself. But I think it's right to say that this isn't at least in email terms, brought to your attention. But was this ever discussed at any of the progress meetings?
Unless you tell me differently, it doesn't ring any bells with me. I genuinely, when I wrote my witness statement, it was based on my recollection that the self-closer was the automatic self-closer was the issue that I recalled coming up. And
Right.
I may have been aware of one or two specific locations, but I didn't know there was anything more than that.
At your regular meetings with Mr. Stokes in the summer of 2011, did he not bring to your attention the recurring problem with self-closers?
I don't believe that he did, no.
Right. We don't see any indication in your annual health and safety reports that the replacement flat entrance doors had any of the problems with the self-closers that had begun to emerge in July 2011, do we?
Well, as I say, I genuinely don't think I was aware of them.
Right.
And I probably wouldn't have made specific reference to the automated closers because that's probably just too much detail for an annual report.
Can you explain why Acosta didn't bring this problem to your attention?
No, I can't.
Can you explain why Carl Stokes didn't bring this problem to your attention?
No, really. I mean, so you've obviously seen paperwork that I wasn't copied into. How widespread was this?
Well, that's a question I have to ask you. You don't, but I think did ask you and you didn't know.
No.
Who was Acosta's line manager?
I don't know if she reported directly to Simon Throp. I'm not sure. She was part of the capital team. There may have been a manager between her and Simon. I'm sorry, I'm not too sure.
Right, and who did Simon Throp report to?
He may have reported directly to the chief exec.
Right. I'd like to turn to the topic of monitoring and maintenance of flat entrance doors next. After the front door replacement programme had come to an end. And can we start by looking at the LGA guide, HOM 30/45964, page 125, paragraph 82.1. And 82 is entitled Inspections and Repairs of Other Fire Safety Measures. And you can see that under 82.1 it says, other fire safety measures such as fire-resisting doors need also to be maintained. The following details the basic requirements for routine attention in relation to these measures. Fire-resisting doors, and then 82.3, there doesn't seem to be an 82.2 for some reason, but 82.3 says, good practice is to inspect timber fire-resisting door sets on a 6-monthly basis as part of a programme of planned preventive maintenance. These inspections are aimed at identifying defects such as, first bullet, missing or ineffective self-closing devices. And then it goes on, damaged doors or frames, removal of locks without suitable repairs to the integrity of the doors, poorly fitting doors caused by distortion or shrinkage or as a result of wear and tear, newly fitted but inappropriate door furniture, and doors which have been replaced using non-fire resisting types. And then 82.4 says this, flat entrance doors should be included within this programme. Where leasehold flats are involved, this will only be possible if there is legal right of access by means of a condition within the lease to carry this out. It is important that any new leases include such a condition. I'm going to assume you were familiar with those paragraphs, perhaps even from the draft in April 2011. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And would you agree that inspections to identify those potential defects listed in the bullet points under 82.3 were necessary to be carried out by the TMO in order to make sure that the doors remained in good condition?
Yeah.
Yes. And thereby, would you accept to discharge the TMO's obligations under Article 17 of the RRO?
Yes.
Yes. Can you explain whether after the flat entrance door programme had come to an end, a 6-monthly programme of planned preventative maintenance was ever put in place by the TMO in respect of fire-resisting doors?
Not a 6-monthly programme, no.
Why was that?
Resource, access, those reasons really. We, as I explained just now, we tried to make use of the access that we were having. We tried to ensure that where we had void properties, where we were doing major works, we had Carl Stokes' inspections, we had the ESAs inspecting the outside of the doors, and any some of these things would be obvious if they were damaged, or if there had been a temporary door which nobody had replaced. My colleague, when he was doing his inspections, would also have looked at the doors externally. We had programs in place in terms of inspecting the communal doors, but flat entrance doors, we did not have a comprehensive 6-monthly inspection.
You mentioned resource.
Yes. It's just, I mean, I think I need to also say that I don't know anybody else from all of the groups that I attended who was able to put in place a 6-monthly. I think it was a sector issue. People had different ways of trying to approach it, but I'm not aware of anyone who had a 6-monthly inspection program in place. So it was something that we were all struggling with. How could we resource it? But also, if we did have the resource and we were going to action this, if people didn't give you access, how were you going to achieve access? And actually, how problematic would that be? We knew from gas safety inspections, we've got quite a large team of administrators trying to make sure that we get access to all of those dwellings. And so it wasn't just a resource to do the inspections, it was a resource to make sure that access was available.
Right, so resource in two senses, money and people.
Bodies, yeah.
In relation to money, was resource a problem?
It was going to be new work, so it potentially we could have found a budget for it, but it would have meant not doing something else.
Right.
There wasn't anything additional.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, no, go.
Did you ever discuss with Anthony Stokes until 2015, and then Barbara Matthews, a budget to cover the requisite 6-monthly preventative maintenance programme?
I'm confident I would have discussed it with both of them, yeah.
When did those discussions about budget begin, roughly? Do you remember?
Sorry, no.
Right. Now, we'll come to the access questions a little bit later, but can we go to your first statement, please, at page 7, paragraph 31? You say there, once the doors were installed, it was for the TMO to monitor the flat entrance doors and ensure that they remained in good condition. For this reason, Carl Stokes continued to inspect a percentage of the front entrance doors as part of the ongoing FRA programme. This required Carl Stokes to gain access to a flat as the self-closing device was not visible when the door was shut. Now, just to be clear, Carl Stokes was only instructed to inspect high-rise buildings like Grenfell Tower every 2 years or every 3 years, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless there were material alterations and he had to go more frequently.
Yes. So that wasn't the regularity recommended by the LGA guide, was it?
No.
No. Now, without going to every single FRA for Grenfell Tower, did you ever ask for or receive a positive assurance that Carl Stokes had inspected the inside of any flat front door?
I don't know if I asked for, but my understanding that the requirements of the contract were that he would inspect a percentage. We had discussed the need for him to inspect each different kind of door in the building, which in some of our buildings could be quite varied, and ideally multiple versions of each different kind of door, and that's what he was endeavouring to do. My understanding is that sometimes he had access problems, but quite often he was able to get into enough dwellings in order, I'm talking across the whole stock, to do the inspections that we've just discussed. He then was required to identify any remedial works that were necessary in the significant findings of the action plan. and it wasn't uncommon for there to be a comment that of a specific flat which would require a self-closer fitted or repaired or a letterbox issue, or I mean there was evidence from what he was doing across the stock that he was trying to fulfil that obligation.
Right, now leaving on one side the single instance of flat 112, which is referred to in the June 2016 FRA, leaving that on one side, my question was, and without going to every single FRA for Grenfell Tower that Mr. Stokes ever did you ever ask him for or ever receive from him a positive assurance that he had inspected the inside of any flat front door?
The answer to your question is I don't recall asking for a positive assurance, but such a long time ago. But I would have expected him to identify the flats where he did get access, whether within the body of his report, and then if they weren't compliant or if there were issues that needed to be actioned, for that to be identified in the significant findings.
Did he ever tell you either how many flats he had been able to obtain access to for the purposes of such an inspection, even outside the FRA, for that block?
No, and I can only think of it in terms of all of the blocks, because obviously the requirement was the same across all of them. I don't remember asking for that information specifically, and I don't remember him providing it specifically.
No. And it would therefore follow from that, wouldn't it? Is this right, that he never told you about any particular difficulties in accessing any particular flats or in any particular blocks for the purposes of that inspection?
No, not especially.
No. Can we go then to your first witness statement, please, at page 7? And let's look at paragraph 32. You say that the front entrance doors were also monitored to a degree by caretakers, also known as estate service assistants, during their weekly and monthly communal area inspections. For example, our caretakers were trained to look for any obvious damage to the door, door furniture and door frame. They would not, however, access a flat to ensure that the self-closing device was fitted and operational. Now, you say that the ESAs would monitor the flat entrance doors during weekly and monthly inspections. Can we look at the weekly ESA checks spreadsheet, which you exhibited as JW25 for your third witness statement? You may remember it. It's TMO 00847315. Now, this may be a difficult document to navigate, but let's see how we go. If you look, I'd like just to run through the headings of each column, and if we can do that without disappearing into blur, that would be good. I wonder whether, this may not be easy. Perhaps I should try it by way of a negative. Do you accept that it doesn't include flat entrance doors?
It may not explicitly cover flat entrance doors, but I would expect, as their responsibility is to inspect the communal parts, and they understood that anything that they witnessed in relation to doors, although this is quite prescriptive, there's an opportunity for them to do some free text, and also they can ring the repairs desk and order things, and have always been able to do that. So these are things we absolutely need them to do, but it's not confined to that.
Except from me that it doesn't include flat entrance doors. If I'm wrong about that, then no doubt those advising you can correct us.
No, I think you're probably right. My point is that it would be accompanied by some free text, and the remit in terms of the communal areas was very clear to them.
Yes. Now then, let's look at the monthly check spreadsheet, which you also kept, I think. CST 6069. And I think we're going to need the native version of that. I just want to put it in front of you. This is more legible.
Yeah.
You will, I think, need, and we are on sheet 2, looking at the headings across the document. Do you again accept that there is no reference there in the headings to flat entrance doors?
Yes.
Yes. So it wasn't formally a part of the ESA's weekly and monthly inspections, was it?
It was required of them, absolutely, definitely, every time they're inspecting the communal areas, but it isn't. It's within. There'll be defects and repairs they're identifying that don't fit neatly within these columns. But I wouldn't expect them to walk away from them and not report them. That's they are very clear that their remit is for the communal areas.
Indeed, and you say earlier that they would report those separately, or by writing them down somewhere or ringing the repairs desk.
Yes.
Why didn't you simply have a column in these two spreadsheets so that ESAs could fill them in?
I mean, we could have done.
Well, why didn't you?
I've absolutely no idea. I was consulted on the spreadsheet, but it isn't my document. I was consulted on what needed to be incorporated into the PDA, and prior to that, the written version of their checklist. But as I say, it's. I mean, if they were going to just stick to these checks, they're going to miss lots of other things that need to be identified.
Right.
And I think, probably considering, as you can see, how many columns there are now, we probably thought, well, there is an opportunity for free text. I can't give you any other explanation. It will have been a decision for the estate services team leader in the long run, but I'm very clear that I would, we looked yesterday at some training that we did with them where we showed some horrendously damaged doors. There's no way they're going to walk away and not have reported those kinds of things or anything else.
Well, you say that. You see, that's leaving it up to their judgment. Was there a system where they could place their observations about flat front doors, whether they were visible from the outside or from internal inspections?
I haven't. I'm not really in a position to comment on how they worked their PDA. I would have understood there to be a free text opportunity to put in all of those additional things that don't come into those prescribed columns. However, just to reiterate, we had a free phone repairs desk, and there was always an ESA hotline, so they had their own direct way into it, where they would report particularly anything that they thought was urgent. So there wasn't, this was supplemented by something else that they had ready access to.
Right. Supposing, in a given month, you wanted to know what buildings, what flat front doors in all of your stock your ESAs had examined, what would you look at?
Well, I would go to the repairs data and ask somebody to run me a report for how many flat entrance doors. I decide the criteria about how many flat entrance doors have been reported as defective or requiring repair or replacement, and they would be able to provide me with that kind of information.
I see. And you say they would run a report. What would the report be based on? What database would it be run off?
It would be from the repair system, which I think is Catheter House. I can't. It's not Keystone and it's not W2. It would be the repair system that we have in place for raising orders. Don't ask me what it's called, because it's probably changed a few times since
I see. So what you're actually asking for there is not a list of which have been inspected, but a list of which of those have been damaged and repaired.
Yes, which is what we said in my statement, that they would be doing a visual check and they would be highlighting anything that needed attention from what they could see. So it's defect reporting. So I appreciate what you're asking me, but the honest answer is it's defect reporting.
Do you accept, I think on the basis of what you've just said, that estate services assistants or caretakers would check fire doors or flat entrance doors as part of those inspections, but so far as flat entrance doors are concerned, visually and ad hoc.
Visually all the time, because they're walking through the building, they're looking at lighting, they're looking at storage, they're looking at all of those things. So visually and ongoing, but unless the resident was there and asked them to come and look at their door from inside or asked them a question, they wouldn't normally have access, and it wouldn't have been expected of.
Well, let's see what Paul Steadman says in his statement to the inquiry, his first statement at TMO 100-49875. 49875. That's page 1 of his first statement to the inquiry. Can we go to page 3 in it and look at paragraph 13 together? He says, I do not know which companies or individuals were responsible for replacing and inspecting the flat entrance doors across the TMO housing stock, or what companies or individuals were responsible for inspecting the self-closing devices. I would check the communal fire doors as part of my estate inspections to ensure that they were closing properly. However, I did not inspect flat entrance doors other than to check them visually on an ad hoc basis. Do you agree with his description of what he did?
That would be for him to say. My expectation, and I think I've always been quite clear with the ESAs, is that they're doing a visual check of all of the common parts every time they go into them, because they're our eyes and ears, and we don't have anybody else regularly on site. If that's what he was doing, then that's for him to say.
Well, you say that's for him to say. If, on the basis that what he's telling the inquiry there is correct, was that or was that not in accordance with the TMO's system for inspection?
But that's the point I'm making. Our expectations of the estate services assistants was that they were responsible for inspecting the communal areas, and that included a visual check of all of the doors, whether that be communal doors or the closed face of the main entrance or the flat entrance doors.
So just to be crystal clear, when he says he did it visually on an ad hoc basis, you say that wasn't sufficiently in accordance with the system that the TMO had put in place, because the TMO expected its ESAs to check every single door.
Well, yeah, yes,
Well,
yes. They're meant to do a visual check. They're doing a visual check of the communal areas. I think, self-evidently, I would expect that.
Well, it may or may not be self-evident. I just want to know whether that was in accordance with the system. So you say ad hoc was a departure from the TMO system, yes?
Yes.
Yes. If what Paul Steadman says here is not only correct, but was what many ESAs were doing, would you agree that they were not monitoring the flat entrance doors in a way that would discharge the TMO's obligations as recommended in the LGA guide, which was to have a system of planned preventative maintenance?
Yeah. But that wasn't the only bit of the picture. As I say, we were looking at void flats, and where we did major works, and we were looking to try and get our gas contractors. We were trying to add other bits to the picture.
Yes. So is the picture so far, just drawing the threads together, that the ESAs were supposed to go round every block, look at every flat front door, and then would report repairs that were needed, and those would go onto the database, and then you might run a report off?
Yeah, part of it, yeah.
Yes.
As I've just described.
Is that what you would describe as a planned preventative maintenance programme to identify any defects in the fire-resisting doors as recommended by the LGA guide?
No.
No.
But it was at that stage our best efforts to work towards one.
Thank you. And did you ever, as a matter of fact, run off a report of the kind that you've identified?
I probably did, but I can't
Right.
confirm or deny.
Now, can I just ask you to look at your first witness statement again, please? Page 7. Paragraph 33. Finally, we also expected tenants to let us know if there was any problem with their doors. Specifically, section 5.3.1 of the tenancy agreement required that the tenant will report all repairs and defects in the premises to the landlord or its agent immediately. Did you expect that self-reporting requirement would be part of the TMO's maintenance and inspection regime?
No.
No.
But it is one way of us being put on notice that there's a problem and being able to deal with it.
Yes, I think it follows from what you've just accepted that you couldn't rely on the presence of that provision to discharge your statutory obligations to ensure that the flat entrance doors were adequately maintained.
No, I couldn't.
And particularly where the door closer wasn't working because it had been removed or disconnected by a tenant fed up with holding the door open while they're pushing a pram through it with lots of shopping. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, can I just ask you to look at your supplementary statement, please, at TMO 00847-305, at page 19, paragraph 64. I've been asked what information was given to residents regarding the purpose and importance of the self-closers on their flat entrance doors. I believe this would have been addressed in some of the periodic fire safety articles in the link, but also by the LFB as part of any home fire safety visits that they conducted. Residents were advised of the opportunity to receive a home fire safety visit in the leaflet given to new tenants. Now, we've looked at Link magazine, you and I together, and the inquiry has reviewed all the Link magazines for tenants between 2013 and 2017, and we've been unable to find any article at all about the importance of self-closers to flat entrance doors.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
I'm sure if that's what you say, that's correct. What I haven't referred to here is, and I'm confident that the letter that the new resident got with the home fire safety leaflet did refer to self-closers. And I'm confident that the resident's handbook also referred to self-closers. I don't know about the website off the top of my head, but I would have thought so. I clearly didn't make this very comprehensive whenever I produced it.
Right. Well, we may need to follow that up a little bit in due course by reference to some documents. But so far as Link is concerned, and as far as the home ownership letter is concerned, we've found no reference to self-closing devices in those documents. Would you agree with that?
I'm surprised, but if you've reviewed them, then...
Right. Do you know why there were no articles about self-closing devices in Link magazine or the home ownership newsletter?
No, and certainly in terms of leaseholders, we'd written to every one of our leaseholders to outline the standards that they need to put in place for their door, which obviously would have included self-closing device.
What is the basis of your belief that the LFB informed residents about the importance of self-closers during their home fire safety visit?
Actually, I don't know for sure, but my understanding of home fire safety visit is the brigade will attend and look at the specific circumstances in that dwelling in terms of so people have confidence that what they're being told relates to them specifically and their own fire procedures. So it seems sensible that would be one of the things they covered.
Now, I think you've given two instances of information being given to tenants about the importance of maintaining self-closing devices, leaflets and the tenant's handbook.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll look at that perhaps in due course just to check what was said. But at least conceptually, do you agree that if residents had not been told of the purpose and the importance of self-closers on their flat entrance doors, then you couldn't rely on them to raise problems with the TMO?
I believe that when the doors were installed, there was some handover information, and I believe that also included information about the importance of a self-closer. I think it came either from Manse Master Door or LHC, but that was my understanding, that when people got a new door, they also got an information pack, which would have had some information about that.
Have you seen such a document?
Not in recent times, but it was always my understanding that there was a kind of handover, sign-off type situation. But perhaps Abby can confirm that.
Right. Well, we may need to look at that as well. Now, let's turn to the topic of ongoing maintenance of self-closing devices. Yep. Can we go to your first statement, please, again, page 45 this time, and look at paragraph 207. And in that paragraph, you refer to the deficiency notice which the TMO had received in respect of Adair Tower on the 12th of October.
Yeah.
2015, which identified, among other things, that the flat entrance doors in that building were not all fitted with self-closing devices. And if you go on to paragraph 208, at page 46, you say this: the door replacement programme of 2012 had focused primarily on the composition of flat entrance doors. If a door was deemed non-compliant, then we would replace it, and the new doors made by Manx Master Door would incorporate a self-closer. However, there had been no programme to retrofit self-closers unless this was highlighted by the FRA. It was therefore clear to us, following receipt of this deficiency notice, that the self-closing devices were becoming a new focus of the LFB and would therefore likely become a wider industry issue. What did you mean by becoming a new focus for the LFB, bearing in mind that this is mid-October 2015?
Yeah. Sorry. It was something that we had. So when we had advised the brigade sometime before that we would look to install, upgrade, replace as necessary self-closing devices on void flats and at various other opportunities where we were doing major works, whatever. At that point in time, it became clear that the brigade's view was that was not going to get us 100% self-closers across the stock quick enough, and therefore we needed to radically change our approach. So I suppose in terms of us, it was becoming more of a focus because the requirements were now no longer acceptable to them.
Right. I mean, do you accept that, in fact, the LFB or LFEPA had actually raised the question of self-closing devices as early as March 2009?
Yes.
Yes, and there's the Steve Turek letter at TMO 00870149. We don't need to look at it. But you accept that it was actually a historical concern of the LFBs for some 6 years before October 2015?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's just look at the deficiency notice if we can. LFB 401613. There it is, 12th of October 2015. And when you got that, I think you then arranged a meeting with Rebecca Burton, didn't you?
I certainly arranged a meeting after the fire. I can't recall if it was in relation to this. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Well, let's look at the document. LFB 403440. This is an email. If you look
okay.
at it.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, you're correct. I didn't remember the timing.
This is from you to Rebecca Burton, 22nd of October 2015. Now, just to be clear, this is 9 days, I think, before the fire at Adair Tower, isn't it?
Yes.
Hi, Rebecca. Could we urgently arrange a meeting, please, to discuss the issues that you put on the agenda for our meeting on Tuesday that you were then unfortunately unable to attend? I'm concerned to hear from Julie that she is about to issue 5 deficiency notices, one for each 5 separate staircases at Balfour House, at least in part due to the fact that nominally fire-rated flat doors do not have self-closers fitted. Our approach to self-closers has been dictated by our fire risk assessor, following clarification he received from a discussion the LFB head of policy and the head of enforcement, and we have provided many FRAs to the LFB over the years, but not been challenged about this approach. Therefore, in good faith, we considered we were applying the appropriate standard. If that is not the case, or if the LFB standard has changed its position on this, I need to understand this, not least because of the potential impact on our organisation. Now, could you just explain what the approach to self-closers had been before you wrote this email?
It was that we would take a variety of opportunities where we could readily access flats to ensure that self-closers were present or that they were to be installed. Subsequent to this, it became clear that that was not going to get us sufficient coverage throughout the stock swiftly enough. But I think there'd also been some miscommunication between Carl and the head of policy and enforcement, or that's what seemed to became teased out of my correspondence with.
Right. What was the
Rebecca.
nature of that miscommunication, did you think?
Well, I think Carl had referred to a meeting that he'd had with the head of policy, but didn't have a written record of it. And I wasn't there, so I'm sort of speculating about what was said. But I think it left him and therefore me with the impression that what we were doing was going to eventually meet the standard, and as long as we had lots of other things in place, that would meet LFB requirements, whereas in fact that was no longer clear.
Right.
The case.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more detail about that in just a moment. Before I do, can I just ask you this? Why did you think that LFB might have changed its standard?
Well, just because I thought they were clearer about our approach, and so I didn't know if something had changed with them or with us, and it's always worth clarifying because we wouldn't always know about internal changes in the brigade unless we asked.
Yes. I
Sorry.
see. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm sorry. You also mentioned that you had up to that point been pursuing a variety of opportunities as a policy, and you then I think identified some of those. Could you just explain, perhaps list the opportunities that you were using?
So we were concentrating on void. So in terms of inspection, we had inspection regimes in place for specialised housing, for temporary accommodation, where we had communal shared facilities, and a number of other locations.
Yes.
And we still had those in place, so that was good. We were concentrating, I suppose, on voids and where we were doing major works or where we were doing redecorations, where doors were being replaced. They were being replaced to the current standard, so that should obviously include, it would be an FT30S as required. There was probably more, but those are the things that spring to mind.
Right. So really, voids, major works, and the temporary and communal.
And specialised housing.
And specialised housing. I see.
Yeah.
Now, coming back then to what you were referring to a moment ago about this discussion that had been had with the LFB head of policy and head of enforcement, were you referring there to a conversation that Carl Stokes had had with Andy Jack?
I think I was. I think that's what he'd advised me of, yeah.
And was that discussion at a meeting on the 8th of November 2012?
I think it was at the tail end of the meeting, and I don't think I was party to all of it. I think I've shuffled off.
Yes. So you were not at all of that meeting?
No, I think the meeting was probably about leaseholder doors, and I think Carl wanted to take the opportunity to speak to Andy Jack and raise some specific things, so I don't think I stayed for that bit.
Right, now let's look at what Andy Jack says about that meeting himself. This is at MET 3040018. And I'll show you just the first page of that. This is his police statement. Mm-hmm. And if we go, please, in it to page 12, you can see paragraph 64 towards the foot of the page. If we can blow that up so it's a little bit more legible, please. Yes, thank you. He says, in respect of maintenance of self-closing devices, he says this: by my recollection, we further discussed the issue of doors and door closers in relation to the maintenance and management requirements of the RRFSO under Article 17 and Article 11. The point being made by me that collectively there was a need not only to maintain doors and self-closing devices in an efficient state and good working order, but that this should be subject to effective planning, organisation, control, monitoring and review. The extent of the monitoring and maintenance regime would need to be circumstances specific so that sufficient checks of the ongoing functionality of fire-resisting doors and self-closing devices could be monitored and necessary remedial action undertaken in a timely manner. My recollection is that it was at this point that checking of fire-resisting compartmentation generally as part of the fire risk assessment process was also discussed. The point being raised, though I cannot recall by whom, that gaining access to flats to undertake any sort of intrusive checks, such as drilling into ceilings to confirm their construction and fire resistance, was difficult and may be contrary to the terms of lease or tenancy. I highlighted the possibility of carrying out these types of checks in flats which have become vacant, or, as it is known, a void. Another check that I was aware being applied was a less intrusive check of the self-closer and any obvious compartmentation, issues such as fire stopping around pipework, which was done at the time of a landlord's gas safety check, though clearly that would not be applicable in all cases. Do you recall the discussion in the way in which Mr. Jack recalls it, as I've read to you there?
Not especially, actually, no.
Right, you don't. Do you recall that he explained that the LFB's view was that there was, quote, a need not only to maintain doors and self-closing devices in an efficient state and good working order?
Yes, I can see that.
You do remember that? But
Well, I don't know if I remember it, but you've just read it to me, so I'm sure that's the case.
Right. Did you also remember that he said that it should be subject to effective planning, organisation, control, monitoring and review?
Yes.
You do.
Well, only because you've read it to me.
Do you agree with his opinion as expressed there?
Do I agree with his opinion? Yeah, it should be.
Yes.
Undoubtedly.
Do you remember whether Mr. Jack explained how often those checks would need to be done?
Well, no, I don't recall.
Or what type of monitoring and review could or should be done?
Don't recall.
Do you remember do you remember that he suggested that self-closing devices could be checked when the gas safety check was done?
Yeah, and I think we discussed that we did try and instigate that, but our gas contractors weren't amenable.
Right. Once they weren't... When did you do that? When did you talk to your gas contractors about the possibility of gaining access to flats for that purpose at the same time as gas fire safety checks?
It would have been in Alex Bosman's time, because it would have been him doing the talking to his contractors.
And once you were defeated by that possibility because the gas undertakers wouldn't play ball, what did you do next?
We were constantly looking for other ways of doing it,
Right.
but also other ways of ensuring that we could get access to do it.
Right. And what about flats where there was no gas supply?
Well, precisely. We hadn't got a...
Right. So that was only ever going to be, at best, a piecemeal or partial solution.
I think it probably would have been as many as 5,000 properties.
Right.
So it would have been a significant step in the right direction, but it wasn't one that they were prepared to countenance, which is frustrating. And I hope there was perhaps a way under the contract that we could have pushed it, but I was advised by my colleague that that wasn't a way that we could go.
Right. Now, you just said that it was in Alex Bosman's time because he would be talking to the contractors. Did you actually instruct Alex Bosman to go to the gas undertakers and ask them to carry out?
Yes, I believe we did.
You did?
Yes.
And when did you do that? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I think he started at the very beginning of 2013. So it could have been considerable time ago.
Now, can we then move on in time to the next year, 2013? Because this meeting here is 8th of November 2012. Mm-hmm. We now go to December 2013, LFB 403534. This is an email that you sent to Matthew Ramsey on the 18th of December 2013. As you can see, copy to Nicholas Cumry, re Fire Safety Elm Park House. Under paragraph 1, you say, it's reassuring to know that you consider the flat entrance doors at this block to be fire resisting. I note your concern about self-closing devices, and I would reiterate our approach to flat entrance doors, which, as I believe you're aware, have been discussed with your colleagues at the LFB consistently over recent years, and again at our regular meeting yesterday. Specifically in relation to tenants' doors, our approach is as follows. First bullet, when replacement flat doors, entrance doors are fitted, they are fire-rated and self-closing. Second bullet, when properties become void, self-closers will be reinstated, installed as necessary. Third bullet, at other times when major work is being undertaken in a dwelling, the self-closer will be reinstated as if it has been disconnected. Now, does that set out your understanding as it stood in December 2013?
Yes, it probably does.
What sort of work did you anticipate that major work would include?
So major work could, when I say capital work programme, so something that's not a responsive programme. So it could be a planned, it could be cyclical decks, it could be roof replacement, door replacement, new heating systems, new windows. It could be a range of different kinds of capital projects.
So could that have included the Grenfell Tower refurbishment?
Yes, I suppose it could.
Yeah. So the Grenfell Tower refurbishment would have been just the occasion, according to your understanding, when all the flats could have been accessed in order to ensure that the self-closing devices were installed and operating.
Yes.
Yeah. But is it right otherwise that once the replacement flat entrance doors had been fitted, and fitted with self-closing devices, they wouldn't be properly assessed or reinstated or refitted with self-closing devices unless either the property became void or when major work was being undertaken, unless they were in...
Or the resident raised a concern, an issue, a repair,
yes.
or a tradesman, repairs operative was in the dwelling and discovered a defect or noted the absence of. So that there kind of were a variety, but it was ad hoc.
Yes. Now, subject to what I've just put to you and your additions, did you think that satisfied what Andy Jack had told you at the meeting on the 8th of November 2012? Namely, that you needed a system of monitoring and review?
No.
No. So can we take it that you were always aware that the LFB were not happy with the system of monitoring and review of flat entrance doors, self-closers?
As I said, I don't recall that bit of the meeting. However, I knew it was something that we wanted to work towards and that we needed to be doing, but at that stage, we hadn't been able to introduce a consistent programme.
Right. So we can take it, can we, that the approach that you set out to Matthew Ramsey here was not one which would have been approved by the LFB historically?
No, but what I would say is if we had had a programme and we had had access to reinstate all of the closers, the fire brigade could easily have attended the next day and find one of them disconnected. We were sort of on a hiding to nothing that, yes, we should and could have been doing, if we'd had resources and all of those reasons, a proactive, regular programme. But we still could not provide any assurance to anybody that would stay 100% connected and that all of those devices would stay in place.
But there's no requirement in the LGA guide, as you understood it, surely, that would be the case.
No, but there kind of is from the fire brigade, that if you've got something holistic in place and they turn up and there's one not there, then that sort of calls into question your whole approach. Anyway.
Why do you say that?
Well, just because that's where I've got to with them before.
Right. So are you saying that you understood the LFB's approach to be that if there was one self-closing device defective in the building, then your programme was defective?
Some of the LFB officers' view is that it should be 100% and it's the landlord's responsibility, and yes. I'm not saying everybody, but we're certainly some that I've had conversations with, that's their view.
Right. Did you receive a reply to this email, do you think?
Sorry, I have no idea. Matthew Ramsey would normally have been quite responsive, so...
Do you remember what it said? Do you remember? We haven't seen a reply.
Well, no, because...
Right.
Sorry, no.
Now, was the approach that we see set out in this email in accordance with your obligations set out in the LGA guide we looked at earlier? Doesn't look as if it was.
No.
No. Was this approach set out in this email formalised in any policy or written down anywhere?
I thought that it was, but I thought that it was.
Who was responsible for ensuring that void flats or empty flats met health and safety standards and fire safety standards before being let or re-let?
That would be the repairs department.
Right, repairs direct. And so far as you know, did they have a proper qualified health and safety person who knew the guidance?
Well, they've always had their own dedicated health and safety advisor, Michael Lyons and then Shannon McInnes.
Right.
So I didn't get involved in repairs direct, but I know that in terms of voids, there was always kind of a voids checklist of standards that they were trying to achieve, and I had put a lot of pressure on them to make sure that in terms of the door should be an FD30. So, FD30S is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And I believe that to the best of my knowledge, the voids checklist did reflect that, but in terms of health and safety within the voids, I couldn't really comment. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Reluctant as I am to point it out, it is 2 minutes to 1, but we are going to move on to a different set of facts within the same topic with some slightly different documents that are probably best taken in one go.
I think it would, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Right, good, thank you. Well, we're going to have a break now. Ms. Wray said we can all have some lunch. We'll resume, please, at 2:00.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
You very much. Thank you. 2:00, please.